All right, welcome to the conversation on the TYT network. We're going to talk about For the People Act. There was a vote on it on Tuesday, and it was 50-50. Luckily, don't worry, Kamala Harris can break that tie, and so obviously it passed. There's no more gerrymandering. We're going to find out all the doctors. Oh no, it turns out the filibuster is still in place, and Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema couldn't magically get 10 Republicans to support it. Well, we want to bring on someone who helped actually craft that legislation. Now, Elizabeth Hira is now policy counsel and Spitzer Fellow at the Brennan Center. But she was on the U.S. Committee on House Administration or worked for them and helped craft what was originally known as HR 1. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. So we all know why it's important. We've talked about it a lot on TYT, and I mentioned just a couple of the provisions here, but there are so many others. It expands voting rights. And then it has wonderful anti-corruption parts, although some of that has been stripped out. So they did, and so that leads me to my first question. They stripped out some of these things, including the matching funds from small donors. That's so important for campaign finance issues that Larry Lessig has worked on, and we've talked to him about it on the show, et cetera. And I know you've talked to him about it. And that was in return for getting it passed, presumably, but it remains entirely unpassed. So do you have any idea if there's a secret deal to get rid of the filibuster? Or did they do the concessions to Manchin for no reason at all?
So just two things, Cenk. And again, thank you so much for having me and for leading this important conversation for folks, particularly to understand where we are at this really exciting moment. I have had friends who have reached out to say, oh my gosh, is everything okay? And I've said, this is exactly what we expected. And this is just the beginning. We've got a summer of political maneuver.
Summertime reading. Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster, and welcome to the conversation. A lot of us are now at that period where we're trying to figure out what are we going to read if we're taking a break from work, and how can we combine it with some of our passions? Well, I have a recommendation for you, and here to talk about it, Joe Berkat. He was once America's most well-respected environmental litigation lawyers. He also wrote a lot about oil and gas. Lately, he's been writing novels. He has written 5 of them, and the most recent one to be published is called Amid Rage. It's about the Pennsylvania extraction industry. Joe, first of all, congratulations on the book. Tell us a little bit about the plot line and why you chose to do this one.
Sure, David, and I'm very happy to be here and really delighted to be on your program for many, many reasons. Amid Rage is a story about fury against government. It's a story about the passions that people are dug up when they're talking about coal mining and other extractive industries. And it's about a young environmental lawyer named Mike Jacobs who works for the Pennsylvania Environmental Agency, Pennsylvania DEP, and he's stuck right in the middle of a dispute between the owner of a coal mine company and neighbors who don't want mining to take place in their backyards. So it's a really, and I think it's a really exciting legal thriller in the same genre as a John Grisham kind of book.
Now, as far as the Mike Jacobs, you mentioned the sort of the leading character. How much of yourself do you see in Mike Jacobs?
Well, I get asked that question a lot, and I would say that Mike Jacobs has the DNA of quite a few different people. So honestly, there might be a little bit of me and Mike. But there's a little bit of a number of other lawyers that I've known over the years, and a whole lot of fiction that goes into Mike.
Now, you mentioned that this is a fiction book, but how much of the situations and the scenarios draw from realistic situations and things you've had to face in your career? And how often does a lawyer involved in environmental litigation face some of the difficult choices that Mike Jacobs faces in this book?
Well, let me say that almost all of the scenarios in one way or another are drawn from real life scenarios. So there's a lot of blasting that takes place in this story. coal mining. And so a lot of the scenarios are drawn from realistic scenarios. As I say, it's ripped from the headlines in many regards. But at the same time, it's also fiction and it's also made up. And what Mike encounters in the course of this story, and what, just like in any good television cop drama, might happen in the course of years to a normal cop, but happens, of course, in one book, in this case, to Mike.
And yet, in the course of a career, I would imagine that lawyers that are in this sort of situation of doing environmental law face a lot of different temptations. Is that fair?
They do, in one way or another. Often the temptation is accepting gifts from coal mine operators, and sometimes it's not even anything nefarious. It might just be a bunch of people are having a lunchtime meeting, and the coal mine operator pulls out his credit card and says, "I'll get this." And most of the people I know who work for government won't accept that little gift. They're just even afraid of the appearance of impropriety. And of course, in this story, that kind of thing happens big time in a mid-range.
Joel, your book as Mid-Range has gotten some terrific reviews. And again, you've written a couple of these. Is there a secret? Is there a strategy towards writing a great novel regardless of the topic?
Well, first of all, you've got to have a great story. And I think I've had some great stories. The previous book was called Drink to Every Beast. That one was about a dumping of chemicals in the Susquehanna River, which is a river that flows right past Wilkes-Barre and then past Harrisburg all the way to the Chesapeake Bay. And that was based actually on a real case. That was a case that I was in the office when I worked for the DEP back in the day. So the strategy is a couple things. Number one, I really do like to have my audiences learn something about environmental issues, but I try not to beat them over the head with it. I try to present it in a way that is understandable, in a way that people will appreciate and enjoy, and I try to present it in such a way that that you learn something at the end of it. And at the same time, I try not to underplay my feelings about the intelligence of my audience. My audience is a very intelligent audience, and I believe that they'll make up their minds for themselves. So through the mouth of the mine operator, through the mouth of the Philadelphia lawyer who represents him, you hear one side of the story. Through the mouths of the citizens, through the mouths of Mike and others, you hear the other side of the story. And presenting some of that complicated technical stuff is not the easiest thing to do, but I try to do it in a way that's both balanced and interesting for the audience.
And certainly interesting enough that I think a lot of people are going to be drawn in to environmental issues simply because of this novel. But stepping away from the novel for a second, where do you see America right now in terms of the extraction industry and the tensions between oil and gas and coal and environmentalists and people who are trying to essentially save our planet?
Well, a mid-range is certainly opening the door to that issue, but it's an issue that's been around now for dozens of years. And certainly the greatest environmental issue of our time is climate change. And when we look at extractive industries, let's say coal mining in particular, I know a lot of people are concerned about coal mining dying as a result of climate change regulation and legislation. But I was looking at some statistics, and you take a look, and in Pennsylvania alone, which is a big coal mine producing state, in Pennsylvania alone, in 2010, 48% of the electric generation came from coal mining. And in 2019, that was down to 17%. And why? Because in 2010, you had 15% natural gas. And now in 2019, more recently in 2019, you had 43% coming from natural gas. And the amount of production has just simply gone down over the years. And that was even during the previous administration. The amount of production went down year after year during the previous administration. So I think we're seeing the end and demise, I believe, of the coal mining industry, really regardless of what happens with climate change regulation.
A lot of Democratic administrations who are happy to see the end of that demise have also talked about, well, let's make sure we do a very good job of training coal miners, of preparing them for the next line of work. In Pennsylvania, how is that training going? What are some of the successes and what are some of the problems that you've seen?
Well, and you raise a great point, and that is, and this really concerns me, and that is the Biden administration's plan that it released on early February the Biden administration's plan talks about replacing mining jobs with high-paying, good jobs that will be something that the people who are displaced from these jobs, the mining jobs, will be able to take. That can't ever mean, though, that you take a job away from a guy in north central Pennsylvania, or you take a job away from a miner in West Virginia or Ohio or Indiana, and you replace it with jobs in the Silicon Valley or in South Carolina. It's got to mean that those jobs are replaced in the community in which the jobs are lost. And I know Pennsylvania and all the states are probably more thinking about how they replace these jobs. And I'm sure they have programs on that today, but it really needs to be ramped up very, very significantly. I believe that's absolutely a part of Biden's plan, but it's really got to be done, and it's got to be done in the right way, because I'm going to tell you something. I've met a lot of mine operators, a lot of people in the blasting industry, a lot of people who are involved in this industry, and they are the salt of the earth. They're some of the hardest working people I've ever met. And those people can't be left behind, and they can't be abandoned. And those jobs have got to be where they are, and not in places that are going to displace them and displace their communities.
I imagine the passions in those communities have also got to be just as strong as ever, even though the number of jobs have been lost and the percentage of coal extraction, as you point out, has been going down pretty steadily.
Absolutely, and I think for the most part, those folks have been supporters of Trump and supporters of the Republicans more recently. But like I said, when you take a look at the pure statistics, just the statistics themselves coming from the EIA, the Energy Information Administration, you see that over time, we've been losing jobs regardless of climate change legislation. It's really been lost to sustainability. It's been lost to natural gas. It's been lost to other things as well, but certainly much less of it today than as a result of climate change.
And back to the book, to the novel of Mid-Rage, in addition to all the sort of the serious stuff about the environment, there's also a love interest, a storyline here in the book, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I got to make the story interesting. There is a love interest. I won't get into that too much, but Mike Jacobs is a young man of 28, and he's got a paralegal that he's in love with. There's another woman that who's his opposing counsel that he falls head over heels with. And it all plays into the story very, very significantly. So none of it is gratuitous. It's all very significant to the story. And I will say that the ending of the story, I believe, is spot on. And I want to also say, too, as a litigator and as a person who cross-examined quite a few witnesses over the course of my career, built into that story are some of my dream cross-examinations. Like, if everything had gone right, if the stars had all lined up for me, they would have been these cross-examinations. And so I'm very excited about the legal scenes in it as well. It is an environmental legal thriller, after all.
But I guess we should also warn lawyers who are in this field, look, you don't have to live up to the character of Mike Jacobs in Joel Burkhart's book, Amid Rage. If your cross-examination doesn't go exactly as it did in his book, that's okay, right?
Well, it took me months to come up with the cross-examination, not a few hours, and not over the course of 20 minutes in a courtroom.
Well, Joel Burkhart, congratulations on this book, Amid Rage. The novel is being published now. Joel's also got a couple more books that are in the pipeline. Joel, good of you to join us in the conversation. Thanks for being with us, and good luck to you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being here, pleasure being on your show.
You got it.
We are onto something that is going to be amazing, but what we need is your help.
The number one problem is there's too much power in too few hands.
Every single problem that we have can be traced back to dark money.
They take large donors, they serve large donors.
So these handful of gatekeepers try to dictate everything.
Like all of you already know, they don't work for you, they work for their donors. So fire them and hire people who will only work for you, that say no corporate backed money.
We are going to change the way we elect candidates in this country.
Uncorrupted Democrats, we're gonna fight for the issues and win on policy.
This is incredibly personal. We need free healthcare for everyone.
We're fighting for $15 minimum wage, single payer healthcare, debt-free college, and we are gonna get money out of politics once and for all.
I've taken a public pledge not to accept any corporate money.
Because the last thing we're gonna do is go into another presidential election and run a corporatist against a populist candidate.
At some point, The buck needs to stop, and it's gonna stop with us. It's gonna stop with Justice Democrats.
So who are we?
People who do not take corporate PAC money.
We're relying on small donors.
99.9% of our contributions came from people.
You're a Justice Democrat, so you don't take any corporate PAC money.
I'm not influenced by money.
As a Justice Democrat, I made that pledge.
Not a penny.
Absolutely no.
I will go to Congress unbossed and unbought.
We try to create a government which works for all of us.
That is what America's about, and that's what a representative democracy should be about.
We are just getting warmed up here.
Vote for uncorrupted Democrats. The fight starts now, it starts today, and it starts with you.
I've been honest with him. Like, yeah, I was upset with you and I should have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
Did you know that more than 20% of the world's oxygen comes from the Amazon? Why? Because of trees. I know what you're thinking. Of course! So what do we want to do? We want to plant more trees so we can save the climate. It's quite literal. So that's what leads to our new partner, Plant Your Change. Love it. It's so easy. What they do is you take the credit or debit cards you already have and you plug it into the system. And if you so choose, you get to round up every purchase to the nearest dollar and they plant a tree for you. Okay. Now you could also choose if you want to do it on only certain kinds of purchases or only so often, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But literally every cent makes a difference here. It's Plant Your Change. And if you want to know more information, just go to tyt.com/trees. Let's go save the planet together.
Welcome back to the conversation. I'm David Schuster. What is going on with U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland? There's some indications that Garland has decided the DOJ should defend some actions of President Trump and the Trump administration. Here to talk about that is John Boniface. He is the co-founder and president of Free Speech for People. They are a legal advocacy organization. John, good of you to join us. So what do you make of what Attorney General Merrick Garland is up to?
Well, I think it's quite concerning. Thank you for having me, David. We issued a letter to Merrick Garland just as he became Attorney General back in February on behalf of a broad coalition of public interest organizations, urging that he immediately establish, upon his confirmation, a task force at the Department of Justice to investigate Donald Trump and all of his associates for all federal crimes they may have committed. We've not received any response to that letter. We detailed all of those areas that we thought deserved further investigation for potential federal crimes. But even beyond that, as you highlighted, the Department of Justice under Merrick Garland's leadership has taken positions that are effectively continuing the Barr Justice Department positions. In the E. Jean Carroll case, it's continuing to argue that the president, then President Donald Trump, was acting in his official capacity when he made accusations against E. Jean Carroll when she made the allegations of the alleged rape that occurred some years ago. And he acted as if, this never occurred, but then hurled insults her way. And they want to argue that's presidential in terms of his actions. And therefore, he's immune from being sued in state court on this in New York. And then the issue is around the Barr memorandum that was issued, deliberated on with respect to how to describe the Mueller report when it was coming out. And this is very important because, of course, if Bill Barr was trying to effectively cover up for the president, act as his political lackey, the public has a right to know that. And in a case in which an organization is trying to access that document underlying what Barr put out, the Justice Department under Merrick Garland now is working to keep it hidden. So this is very serious and concerning in terms of what it means for protecting our democracy and protecting the basic principles of the rule of law, including that no one is above the law, not even a former president of the United States.
Yeah, a lot of people in this democracy seem to agree. At last I checked, the petition has gotten over 200,000 signatures. Is there precedent for a petition triggering a government agency like the Department of Justice to essentially appoint the equivalent of an independent counsel or an independent investigator?
There absolutely is precedent for demands that the Justice Department follow the rule of law and in fact engage in crucial investigations that need to happen when you have high government officials not following the law and defying it. But I think it also has to be said that we dealt with unprecedented matters under the Trump administration, matters in which this president, the former president, so trampled on the Constitution and the rule of law, acted like he was above the rule of law, that it is a presidency on its own that needs that kind of scrutiny, unlike any other. It was the most corrupt presidency of our history. And so in light of all that, and in light of the fact that President Biden himself said he wasn't going to interfere with the Justice Department and was going to let the Justice Department do its job wherever those chips would fall, then that means that this independent task force is needed all the more, because it would demonstrate that Merrick Garland is creating independence from political considerations, is carrying out these investigations with leaving no stones unturned. And that's crucial to the public trust in the rule of law. I'll give you one example, just among many others, is the Department of Justice decision under Bill Barr to close the investigation at the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Southern District of New York with respect to the campaign finance violations that Michael Cohen and Individual One, whom everyone knows is the former president, Donald Trump, engaged in conspiring to commit prior to the 2016 election to make those hush money payments to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. Michael Cohen, of course, went to federal prison as a result of those investigations, was indicted, but Individual One was not named or indicted, and yet the Barr Justice Department shut it down. And the question is, why has the Garland Justice Department not reopened that investigation? Why?
Could it be because the New York Attorney General has joined forces with the Manhattan DA Cyrus Vance, and those are the very issues that they're looking at. And there's every indication Vance has impaneled a grand jury that they are considering indicting Donald Trump and some of his associates for matters arising from what happened in the Southern District of New York.
So I think that's a critical question, and I do agree that the state investigation should proceed, but that should not mean that the federal investigations essentially get closed off. If there are federal crimes as well as state crimes, then the former president needs to be held accountable for all of them, not just under state law. And what's happened here, unfortunately, is there has been a lot of attention placed on the Manhattan DA's investigation and on the New York Attorney General's investigation, and very little focus on what is the Department of Justice doing about these potential federal crimes the former president committed.
What seems to be coming out of Merrick Garland and some of his associates is that the Department of Justice, their priority, at least in some of these decisions, is to not necessarily focus on the corruption. And I think a lot of them, from what I've heard personally, agree that Trump was the most corrupt president ever. But their priority, at least now, seems to be protecting the erosion of presidential power. And they fear that some of these cases might chip away at the executive authority. Is that a solid argument?
It's not a solid argument with respect to the examples they've provided. I mean, the idea that they're going to intervene and try to stop E. Jean Carroll from having her day in court for the alleged rape allegations based on in terms of her defamation case against the president, based on the idea that what the president was doing was in his office as president in responding to that defamation or those allegations underlying the defamation case is outrageous. I mean, the fact is that the president wasn't doing that. Donald Trump was doing that in his personal capacity. So this isn't a presidential power consideration. But I'll add one other point on this, which is beyond the corruption concerns, there's the actual concerns we saw on January 6th with the president inciting a violent insurrection at the US Capitol. And those are federal offenses. Engaging in sedition, engaging in insurrection, those are federal crimes. And the idea that this is solely going to be a commission, which hasn't, of course, been voted upon by Congress and received majority support from the standpoint of the filibuster being the blockade to it. But the idea that now this is simply going to be a congressional investigation and no federal crimes that may have been committed with respect to the insurrection, the former president would be resulting in DOJ accountability is very concerning. The president must be held accountable to the law, not just to an investigation by the media or by members of Congress.
Yeah, that select committee that the Democrats apparently are putting together, it will still have some subpoena power. And in fact, there is an ability to, I suppose, prosecute somebody within the US Justice Department if somebody lies to that congressional panel. But I think there are a lot of people that would agree that there should at least be some sort of independent counsel, independent prosecutor for all the events that transpired around January 6th. What do you think is holding back Merrick Garland and the Justice Department in pursuing that?
David, I fear that what's holding them back is the notion that they want to turn the page on this era under Donald Trump, that they do not want to have an indictment of the former president cloud the agenda of the Biden administration. The problem with that fear is that in effect sets us up for an even worse situation down the road of another person, whether it's Donald Trump or someone else coming into office who can engage in even more reckless and lawless behavior as this former president did. And it sets a very dangerous precedent going forward that in fact, people can be above the law, especially if they occupy the Oval Office.
There has been this argument, and I would agree that President Trump essentially politicized the Department of Justice, an agency that has traditionally been independent. But there's also the argument the other way that if Merrick Garland were to respond to public political pressure, he would be politicizing it as well. Is there a middle ground? Is there a way for Merrick Garland to do as you would like, but without seeming to undermine the confidence that a lot of people want to have in the Justice Department as a neutral arbiter?
Well, I want to be clear that this letter that we issued on behalf of a coalition of organizations was not demanding the prosecution of Donald Trump. It was demanding that the Justice Department start this task force to conduct all investigations as necessary on potential federal crimes that the former president may have committed. There's nothing political about that. This is about upholding the rule of law and upholding the integrity of the Justice Department itself. And that's what's at stake here. And if there are no investigations, if we're just gonna go ahead and say we're turning the page and never holding this president accountable, then what we're really doing is saying that he is above the law and we're undermining the basic trust that people put in the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. And I also think there is this idea of precedent that maybe the Justice Department, people in the future Justice Department will look back and say, aha, well, this is what we can this is what they were able to get away with in the Trump administration. So why not have a rogue attorney general? What's the problem? In any case, John Bonifaz, co-founder and president of Free Speech for People, a legal advocacy organization. John, good of you to join us. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
David, thank you.
You got it.
Welcome to the Young Turks. I'm Anna Kasparian. You guys know I'm freaking out. Emma Vigeland, co-host of The Majority Report and a former TYT employee, good friend of mine, good friend of the show, Emma Vigeland. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me after all of this time. I mean, I know that you and I left on horrible terms. So, I mean, it's been a bit of work getting back here, but I'm glad we were able to put aside our differences.
Well, Emma, I will say it is impressive how you've managed to build a successful lane for yourself in this competitive media landscape by not only leaving TYT, but not attacking us immediately after leaving TYT. It almost seems as if you have interesting things to say and you have some talent, you'll find your place in this landscape. But anyway, obviously, it's so good to have you. And I saved a story specifically for you because the India Walton story out of Buffalo, the mayoral election there, was something that we were being asked to cover yesterday. But I was like, nah, I want to get a New Yorker up in here to discuss. I know you've been following these local races. And everyone, please check out The Majority Report, where Emma is working as a co-host along with Sam Seder, doing really great work. I always enjoy watching the show whenever I get a chance to watch. It's just really, really great work. But without further ado, Emma, why don't we get to that India Walton story that I really want to tell the audience about, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it.
All that we are doing in this moment is claiming what is rightfully ours. That's we are the workers. We do the work. And we deserve a government that works with and for us.
India Walton, the socialist candidate for mayor out of Buffalo, New York, is now the presumptive winner of that mayoral race. She has beat the Democratic incumbent and is poised to win, considering the fact that this is a heavily Democratic area. She will be the first socialist mayor in Buffalo, New York since the 1960s, but also the first female mayor of New York. And usually we'll hear from corporate Democrats focus on the identity portion of candidates without talking about the actual substance of the candidate. In this case, we have someone who is full of incredibly important ideas, someone of substance, but more importantly, someone who has the right class analysis in determining which policies are necessary for the people of Buffalo, New York. Let me give you more details about her. India Walton is a nurse and community activist who ran with the support of the Democratic Socialists of America and the Working Families Party. When the Associated Press called the race Wednesday morning, that was yesterday, Walton was leading Byron Brown, a longtime member of the Democratic establishment, by 7 percentage points, or by about 1,500 votes, with all of the in-person ballots counted. I want to go to this next video of her reaction to learning that she had won in this primary race. Let's take a look at what she told her mother.
Mommy! I won! Mommy, I'm the mayor of Buffalo. Well, not till January, but yeah. Yes! Oh my God. Yes, Mom! I won!
So awesome to see that. Like, when you're in this atmosphere of faux emotion and pandering to people, it's really nice to see real individuals run for these local races and win and also express themselves in an authentic way. But more importantly, this next video gives you a sense of what she stands for as someone who plans to fight for working people in New York.
Yourself a socialist? Oh, absolutely. The entire intent of this campaign is to draw down power and resources to the ground level and to the hands of the people. And when we think about socialism, we're perfectly fine with socialism for the rich. We will bail out Wall Street and banks and give $1 billion in tax incentives to one of the richest people in the world to build an empty Tesla factory in South Buffalo. And when it comes to providing the resources that working families need to thrive, socialism becomes scary at that point. So I'm very proud to be a Democratic socialist. I am proud to have the support of Buffalo DSA and National DSA.
So Emma, talk to me a little bit about what the reaction was among the left in New York as we learned about India Walton winning this primary race in Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean, so we're here in New York City where it was incredibly deflating that Eric Adams is very much likely going to be the Democratic nominee for mayor, which means that he will probably be the mayor. He used to identify as a Republican. He doesn't even necessarily live in New York. We're not exactly sure. He has multiple tax evasion potential issues. He's a former cop who ran on a tough on crime stance. He was one of 2 candidates who did not commit to reducing police funding, him and Andrew Yang. And so his apparent victory was quite deflating for us here in New York City. But when you go and look at Buffalo, it's a town that has in the past few decades just been ravaged by outsourcing of jobs and the kinds of neoliberal politics that have hurt a lot of other parts of the country, particularly in the Rust Belt. So it's very reminiscent of a lot of those cities there. And so seeing a socialist, an unabashed socialist, win in that primary, and by all accounts, it was due to classic, just grassroots campaigning, similarly to the ones that we've seen in other upsets of incumbents, on the federal level with Jamal Bowman and Ocasio-Cortez here in New York. But there is something brewing here, right? I mean, in New York, yes, a party machine boss type guy, and Eric Adams likely won the primary, and that's a huge blow. And I mean, I'm saying this now, if you read reporting in New York Magazine and others, I mean, there are significant potential illegalities behind the scenes about this guy. I mean, wow. I'm not necessarily sure. Yes, so I literally just did an interview on it. That's why it's so fresh in my mind. I think this is going to be a very plagued by scandal administration. So if he gets to office, but with India Walton, that's the kind of stuff where you go, we are making progress. And on the biggest stages, it may be difficult because there's so much money here in New York that's going in the other direction in a big city like New York City, obviously. And I know in LA you face the same thing, but we're chipping away. And a lot of that is due to grassroots organizing in places like DSA, who have been, unfairly besmirched by the online left that doesn't actually represent the left.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because for anyone who's actually interested in what's been working on the ground, I think the New York DSA has been incredibly successful in organizing, in canvassing, and ensuring that in these local races, they get their candidate in. And it's really nice to see it, because while you're absolutely right in regard to New York City's mayoral race and how deflating that can be, it's important for the left, the organizing left, to post their W's, right? And by the way, DSA has a Twitter account called DSA Posts Its W's, and I love it because there is a path to victory, but it requires actual work on the ground, actually listening to some of these organizers who have done this many, many times and know exactly how to get people involved, how to persuade people, how to canvass, all of that. So look, the media is an important element to the left in regard to keeping people informed and making sure that we at least boost various organizing efforts when we get the opportunity to. But the real ground game has been successful in New York, and I want people to focus on that whenever we feel pretty powerless, because oftentimes, especially with recent developments on Biden's infrastructure bill, we can certainly feel pretty powerless, but there are paths to victory. And this particular mayoral race is one example of that. Now, just getting back to Byron Brown, the Democratic incumbent in Buffalo, he seems to refuse to concede. So Brown, who once led the state's Democratic Party and is a close ally of Governor Andrew Cuomo, declined to concede on Tuesday night, despite the margins separating him from Walton. In fact, he says, we're going to make sure every single vote is counted. And then when it became pretty clear that every vote, I mean, once every vote is counted, she's still gonna be the person who beats him, beats everyone in the Democratic primary. He kind of switched his messaging over to, well, I'm not gonna concede, I'm gonna make sure that people can write my name in during the general election, which takes place in November. But it seems like it's good day and good luck for him. I mean, it seems like it's pretty much over.
Well, I mean, good. I'm happy because one, this is super reminiscent of what Crowley tried to do in the aftermath of being defeated by Ocasio-Cortez. He conceded, and the media goes, "Oh, he played the guitar. Thank you so much for being so gracious." And then, like 2 weeks later, he's like, maybe I'm gonna run on the Working Family Party's ticket and I'm gonna sap votes from her, even though it was a heavily blue district and it wouldn't matter anyway. But because he was endorsed by the Working Families Party, there's a thing in New York where you could potentially vote for a candidate on that ballot, even if they're both a Democrat and ran in the Democratic primary. And so this is very New York. It's very reminiscent of a lot of the tactics that we see from someone like Andrew Cuomo, from someone like Joe Crowley. In many ways, it's super retrograde here because it's an entirely blue state. And so it enables old school party boss type politics where people play extremely dirty.
Yes.
And so why I'm trying, and I know California is very similarly, and as we saw with Alex Morse, Massachusetts is similar. So when you have these big states where they're traditionally very blue, it creates corruption in and of itself because there's not really an opposition. Not that I want Republicans to win, but because it creates its own ecosystem, and then you have corruption in many different ways. So luckily, though, I doubt that this will be successful. It's probably just he's feeling a little bit butthurt, and this is one of the tactics that he's toying around with.
Yeah, definitely. And one other thing I wanted to draw a little bit of attention to, because what you said about the money pouring into New York City's mayoral race made me think about how, it seems like the corporate Democrats, the neoliberal wing of the party, certainly neglected the mayoral race in Buffalo. But had they been paying closer attention to it, if they had injected more cash into defeating Walton in that race, I think they could have probably been successful in that because we've seen just how powerful money in politics really is. We're also seeing something really interesting in Ohio's 11th district. That's the race that Nina Turner is running in. She's trying to win that congressional seat, and she has a massive lead over the corporate Democrat in that race, who was just endorsed by Hillary Clinton. And why did Hillary Clinton endorse her? Well, because the corporate ring of the Democratic Party realized that Nina Turner had this massive lead and they needed to get involved immediately. When they're ignoring it, that's when progressive candidates can really succeed. And so immediately after that endorsement by Hillary Clinton, you see corporate money flowing into that race. Cenk thinks that it's already too late, but I do think it's an interesting case study to see what happens when corporate Democrats are distracted by a myriad of other things and actually allow democracy to, play out without the government, not the government, without the corporate corruption and lobbying taking place.
Yeah, certainly. And that race is interesting too, because Nina Turner obviously had a lot more name recognition than the standard, DSA endorsed candidate that's going to be coming into a Democratic primary. So their guard was probably already up. But on the flip side, it's also beneficial to Nina because she's got that name recognition. And then, on that day that Hillary Clinton endorsed her opponent, she broke her single day fundraising record.
Yep.
So speaking of Jamal Bowman earlier in the segment, Hillary endorsed Eliot Engel, who was the incumbent. Bowman won. I think she did the same thing to Crowley. AOC won. Let's hope it's the kiss of death. And she's 3 for 3 here. I would love that.
Totally. If she were to endorse me, if I ran for anything, I'd be like, no, don't curse me, don't curse me. I don't want that endorsement. And by the way, she would never endorse me,
exactly.
Which is good. It's a badge of honor. Anyway.
Right.
All right. Well, let's move on to some of these updates on the infrastructure bill. Joe Biden has reached a deal on the infrastructure proposal with a group of bipartisan senators. And while it's being celebrated as some progress in the corporate media, I would argue that this is actually a pretty bad sign, even though Biden would have you believe that he's going to continue fighting for the very things that he conceded on in this infrastructure bill. So first, let's go to this video of Joe Biden addressing the press on the deal, although with not many details.
We have a deal, and I think it's really important. We've all agreed that none of us got all that we wanted. I clearly didn't get all I wanted. They gave more than I think maybe they were inclined to give in the first place. But this reminds me of the days we used to get an awful lot done up in the United States Congress. We actually worked with them. We had bipartisan deals. Bipartisan deals mean compromise. We agreed on infrastructure. We made serious compromises on both ends. There is, and they'll give you the numbers. But we did not, they did not, and I understand their position. Republicans and this group did not want to go along with any of my family plan issues, the child care tax credits, the human infrastructure that I talk about. And that we'll see what happens in a reconciliation bill in the budget process. If we can get some compromise there, and if we can't, see if I can attract all the Democrats to a position.
If you watched that video and didn't feel absolute doom, you're not paying attention to what's going down in politics. Because what he's referring to there regarding bipartisanship is all about working with the party that Democrats described as a massive threat to this country. They campaigned against Republicans as if they are the worst of the worst, people who pose a threat to all of us, which actually, in a lot of ways, I agree with. But then they turn around and talk about the importance of bipartisanship. No, how about representing what the majority of American voters want? Okay, never mind the Democratic voters who showed up, turned up, and voted for Biden, and also the two other Democratic candidates in the Senate runoff races in Georgia. How about ignoring the obstructionist right wing in Congress and actually delivering to the Republican voters who find your infrastructure bill, your original infrastructure bill, incredibly popular? It's not just Democrats, it's not just independents, it's Republicans as well. And for some reason, we keep hearing from Democrats that we need to capitulate to the very individuals that they described as a massive threat to our lives during the last election. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, so there are a lot of scenarios about what could play out here, right? And the first of things is, Biden has throughout his entire career fetishized the Senate and Senate process, which includes bipartisanship. And that's also why he is not pushing hard to end the filibuster while he's still kind of virtue signaling. I hate to use that term, but Democrats fundraise all the time off of gun violence and off of police brutality. And Biden saying he's not going to do anything by executive order. Okay, well then you need to pass legislation that can pass through the 60-vote filibuster. And so if you're not addressing that, then I don't really want to hear anything about gun control or climate change or anything like that. But this you can pass via 50 votes, via the reconciliation process, because it pertains to the budget infrastructure. And yet Biden seems to be going through this entirely unnecessary process where he is just saying that we should do a bipartisan bill. Well, why? I mean, I don't get it. I don't get it whatsoever. But the point, Jesus, my mom's calling me. The point is that I mean, there is potentially some sort of plan in place, right? Pelosi's saying that she's not going to vote on this bipartisan bill unless there are two bills, the bipartisan bill and the reconciliation bill, unless they both pass the Senate. And Biden is saying the same thing. And the reconciliation bill would contain climate proposals, right? But I mean, I don't trust them. That's the problem.
Right.
If that were the case, and they're going to do two bills, one, and they're just going to handle infrastructure through the bipartisan process, and then do a separate reconciliation bill, I'm like, okay, great. Then we have two bills. But I don't believe you. I believe that they will eventually, as is their way, cave, and then they'll have one bill.
Yep.
And the one thing that's really saving them from themselves here is that Mitch McConnell is an obstructionist, and he is probably, if Biden signs on to something, not going to say yes to it just because Biden signed on to it.
So let's unpack everything that's going on, because I agree with your analysis and certainly with the part where you're skeptical of the Democrats actually passing a second bill through reconciliation. So first, what were the concessions? Everything, basically. Everything that we heard Republican lawmakers would agree to is what they're gonna get. Everything in regard to taxes remains unclear, because remember, there's been a lot of debate about the so-called pay-fors. Republican lawmakers wanna put the onus on American workers to essentially increase our gas tax and make sure that that regressive tax is implemented so corporations and the wealthy don't have to increase their taxes. Biden says that he will not, under any circumstance, sign on to that. So even today, with this announcement of a bipartisan agreement, we still don't know what they have agreed to in regard to the pay-fors. So there's that. Also, remember, Biden had called for quite a bit of funding for this infrastructure bill to the tune of $1.7 trillion. Well, the pared down plan, the bipartisan agreement, with $559 billion in new spending, has rare bipartisan backing and could open the door to the president's more sweeping $4 trillion proposals. No, it won't. Later on, this is according to the Associated Press, the senators have struggled over how to pay for the new spending, but left for the White House with a sense of confidence. So that should be reassuring to you all, right? That they left the White House with a sense of confidence that they'll figure it out. To me, that is a foreshadowing of regressive taxation to come, because there's no circumstance under which 10 Republican senators would sign on to legislation that would increase taxes on the rich. So I'm actually skeptical that this bipartisan agreement is actually gonna go through. Then you get to the second part of it, which is, all right, well, we've made all these concessions to Republican obstructionists in the infrastructure bill, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna pass all of our other priorities through a second bill, and we'll do it through reconciliation, which doesn't require 60 senators to vote in favor of it. We can do it through a simple majority. Well, here's what Pelosi says. Pelosi on Thursday welcomed the bipartisan package, but she warned that it must be paired with the president's bigger goals now being prepared by Congress under a separate so-called budget reconciliation process. And then she was quoted as saying, this is important. There ain't gonna be a bipartisan bill without a reconciliation bill. And Biden said something very similar. I expect that in the coming months, this summer, before the fiscal year is over, that we will have voted on this bill, the infrastructure bill, and as well as voted on the budget resolution. But if only one comes to me, this is the only one that comes to me, I'm not gonna sign it, it's in tandem. He's making it very clear that he needs to have both bills done simultaneously, one through a bipartisan vote, allegedly, the other through reconciliation, which will include things like childcare, free public college, some of the human infrastructure components of his original proposal that was rejected by Republicans. But in order for that to pass through reconciliation, Emma, wouldn't that mean that we would run into the same issues we ran into with Sinema and Manchin, not wanting to support the bill because it's not bipartisan enough? And I'm talking about the second bill.
Yeah, and the second bill is the one that's the most likely to be axed, because what people don't realize is that as time passes, these things get less likely to pass because we are getting closer and closer to the 2022 midterms, and these representatives and these senators are less likely to take tough votes. So, we don't have all the time in the world here. And by the way, a 50-50 split in the Senate, there are very old senators, and I'm not being morbid here. Somebody could pass away, and it's not a given that they're gonna have this 50-50 split. So, I mean, there should be an effort to get this done as quickly as possible, and yet we're doing this elaborate dance, seemingly for the benefit of two people, and that's Manchin and Sinema. But there are more people than that. There's Mark Warner, there's Jon Tester, there are other senators on this ridiculous, moderate, corrupt train, honestly, who essentially want the package to be small and answer to people like the Chamber of Commerce and other parts of industry. Although largely infrastructure is fairly well accepted by I think corporations, and that's probably why Biden's targeting it first. But that's the problem, is that, if this dance works, Biden looks like a genius, right? Where, they were never gonna accept the bipartisan infrastructure proposal anyway. So maybe we'll do 2 big bills through reconciliation, and Manchin and Sinema will see the light that they were always unreasonable from the start. I think that's honestly what the optimistic take is on this, but I don't think it's gonna happen. And the doomsday scenario is that Biden feels the pressure to pass something going into the midterms. McConnell obstructs effectively enough, and the only thing we get is a skinny infrastructure bill. And then the second part is abandoned altogether, which deals with all of the human components, which is the number one thing that someone like Mitch McConnell and the Republican Party does not want the Democrats to do. One, because he wants to destroy the social safety net as much as possible ideologically, and that's what his donors tell him. And 2, it would be a successful political win because these things are popular, including elder care. I mean, you have Republicans going on air railing against elder care isn't a part of infrastructure, as if the average American cares what the actual definition of infrastructure is by Washington standards.
I know.
They're all about the elder care part. So there are a lot of moving parts here, but I am concerned about the direction this is going, no doubt.
Absolutely. Well, we'll keep you guys posted on any other developments, but for now we got to take a short break. When we come back, we'll show you exactly why passing a robust infrastructure bill is so important. Come right back. What's up, everyone? Welcome to our first social break of the day. It is day 4 of Member Appreciation Week, and we're celebrating our members through Shop TYT. So you get a free tote bag at our Shop TYT store with every $50 or more in purchases. That's today only, and you need to be a member in order to take advantage of this. Just go to tyt.com/notice, and you'll get all the details on how to take advantage of that promotion if you are a member. And for those of you who are not members and you're interested in joining, first off, you get all sorts of perks, including our bonus episode, which we have a lot of fun with, and a bunch of other members only exclusive programming. And you get access to our archives, so you get videos on demand. And more importantly, I would argue you guys help to keep us free and independent of corporate influence, and we really, really appreciate that. There's also an Ohio event that TYT is part of. It's the Economic Justice Hall, and tickets are now available for the event. It'll take place in Cleveland, Ohio, featuring Senator Nina Turner and co-hosted by Killer Mike and Cenk Uygur. They'll be talking about economic justice and issues like a living wage, healthcare, education, criminal justice, and more. Just go to tyt.com/events to RSVP. There's also a $3 donation per ticket that we'll be giving to Rock the Vote. So just go to that link to learn more details, tyt.com/events. Also, we're gonna be doing an Ask Me Anything for a portion of our members. So if you are a YouTube channel member at the producer level or higher, you can submit your questions to both me and Cenk. We'll be answering them on Tuesday, June 29th. And that, Cenk is totally right, that photo of him is interesting.
What's going on with his mouth?
I don't know. Okay. Let me just say, Cenk for some reason has a hard time smiling for pictures, so I think it's an example.
The closed mouth one looks great. Like, what the hell happened here?
Oh man. All right, look, let me give you the rest of the details on this because we got to go. So you can join by, you can become a member by clicking on the join button if you're watching on YouTube. And in order to take part in this Ask Me Anything, which we're gonna be doing regularly, you need to be at the producer level or higher. All right, we got a minute left. I'm gonna read some comments. Starting with our super chats, Sean writes in and says, I have to give some love to Emma. So happy to see you on TYT again. Keep up the great work. Sporp Girl says, is anyone else concerned that the reason 45 Donald Trump wants to be Speaker of the House is because the Speaker is third in line of succession? Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's thought that far into it. And I don't think he's actually gonna end up being Speaker of the House, but who knows, who knows? I also didn't think he could win in 2016 and he did. I also thought he was likely to win in 2020 and he didn't. So maybe my political predictions are not as great as I thought they were. Anyway, we gotta get back to the show. We'll see you guys there. Welcome back to TYT. I want to give a special shout out to Susan Green, who she's actually, for lack of a better word, my coach, and she's a big fan of yours, Emma. So I had to let her know that you were co-hosting the entire show with me today, and she's super excited. So shout out to Susan Green.
Susan?
Yeah, she's a great person. I met her through Michael Brooks, and she's become a really important part of my life. So the fact that she's a fan of yours says a lot about her, and vice versa. So,
well, I mean, the fact that she was friends with Michael says a lot about him, and I recognize where I'm sitting. So, hi, Susan, and we knew a great person.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, we just talked about the updates on Biden's infrastructure bill. They're not really positive updates, unfortunately, but I do want to talk about why it's important to actually move forward with robust spending and focus on improving this nation's infrastructure. A pedestrian bridge collapsed and crashed down onto traffic onto the DC 295 in Northeast Washington, DC. At least 5 people were injured. Luckily, no people died as a result of this, but it was a stark reminder of this nation's crumbling infrastructure. In fact, we do have a few videos to show you of what happened, and keep in mind that this is a bridge that had some structural issues based on some recent inspections that were done. And there are bridges like this all across the country that have been neglected, that are in dire need of repairs, dire need of federal spending in order to repair them. And in the meantime, you have Congress literally nickel and diming the kinds of projects that need to be done through these negotiations on Biden's infrastructure bill. Now, without further ado, take a look at this dash cam video of the bridge collapsing.
Oh! Whoa! Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Bro, this cannot just be happening.
And ABC News did a pretty good report detailing how this likely happened and what the issues were in its most recent inspection. Take a look.
Tonight, authorities are investigating this terrifying scene, a pedestrian bridge collapsing onto one of the busiest highways in the nation's capital. Officials believe this truck slammed into the bridge, sending it crashing down. Drivers trapped in their cars, buried under the debris along I-295.
We had a collision with the bridge right here, which separated the bridge from its mooring. The result of that, collision caused multiple cars to be involved.
And Rachel, everyone has survived this, and you've learned more tonight about a recent inspection of that bridge.
Yeah, David, the mayor saying tonight that this bridge was inspected earlier this year and that everything checked out.
I mean, we're so lucky that no one was killed in this awful bridge collapse. And just to give you some more details about the inspection that I've been referring to, the bridge received a 4 or poor rating after it was inspected in February. So it was inspected in February and they realized, oh, it's a little compromised. But we're still using the bridge? Like, why hasn't the bridge been like shut down until they do the repairs at least? I mean, we're lucky that no one got killed. It had declined on a national scale that rates bridges from 0 to 9 from February of 2019, when the bridge had been given a 5 or a fair rating. A rating of 4 is the threshold that prompts a multi-year planning process to replace the bridge. I mean, richest country in the world, Emma, but once you realize that a bridge isn't structurally sound, you need to trigger a multi-year planning process before anything gets done. That's America. Great.
Yeah, and it's when you say that, that's the kind of bureaucracy that triggers conservatives, like, oh, the government can't get anything done, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing that they would say. But the reality is that it's not the government in and of itself, it's what the government chooses to fund. And the same conservatives that would say that would be outraged if we were to slash the military budget or adjust our national priorities about what kinds of money we give out to things, right? I mean, oil subsidies is another good example. It's not that much money. Our military budget is, though. And if we just allocated or reallocated a fraction of that money, we could inspect and maintain those bridges at a much quicker pace. And that's not the only bridge. That's far from the only bridge that has some of those structural issues and implications. And the American Society for Civil Engineers, they do, I think, every 5 years, some sort of grading process for each country or our country at the very least, in terms of the rate of infrastructure and what it is comparably to the rest of the world. We upgraded from a D+ to a C-. So
did we really?
Richest country in the world. Sorry.
Did we even do that? I'm actually shocked that there was any improvement.
I'm surprised too, but I mean, some of these statistics are shocking. There's a water main break every 2 minutes in the United States. 43% of our public roadways are in poor or mediocre condition.
Yeah.
And we're really a country that's terrible at being proactive about anything. We're not proactive about our health care. We essentially wait for an emergency to happen and then, okay, don't worry, you have to pay $30,000 in medical bills because we don't provide health insurance for you, even though it would save the country a ton of money for us to give you that up front. You're just gonna have to pay for it yourself. We did this in Katrina. We do this all the time. We allow for disasters to happen and then we say, well, none of this could be prevented. Well, if we were proactive and we decided to shift our national priorities in a way that made sense, stuff wouldn't happen.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. We had a very similar mindset in researching for this story because I wanted to look into where the United States stands relative to other developed countries regarding infrastructure. And the World Economic Forum regularly puts out its list of infrastructure in the developed world. And here's what we know. So first off, if you look at the list of total developed countries pertaining to infrastructure, we're all the way down at 13. If you look at this graphic that was put out by the OECD and then published by the Washington Post, China actually spends a lot more money on its infrastructure than we do. About 5.5% of their GDP is invested in infrastructure, whereas in the United States, it's a little more than 0.5% of our total GDP being invested in infrastructure, transportation infrastructure specifically. So I want to be clear about that. But when you look at the World Economic Forum, here's what they know. For water and electricity utility infrastructure, the United States actually ranks number 23rd in the forum scores on transportation. The forum score takes into account 8 measures, rating the United States number 12 globally. The United States falls behind on the railroad score. The forum measured the number of miles of railroad track per square mile in each nation, rating the country at number 48. So, to me, the most concerning is our utility infrastructure. I mean, we're seeing how that's playing out in a privatized, deregulated model in Texas. Our water infrastructure is clearly incredibly damaged to the point where not just Flint, Michigan, but many municipalities throughout the country have unsafe levels of lead in their drinking water. So, when we hear members of Congress and President Joe Biden applaud themselves for reaching a bipartisan deal on the infrastructure bill that's nothing more than this incredibly watered down piece of legislation. And we don't know all the details of where all the money is even gonna go or how the money is gonna be spent. Is this gonna be a public-private project? Is this gonna be nothing more than another way of redistributing taxpayer money to private corporations and developers who inflate their prices and get rich off of these government grants? I wanna know how it's gonna be carried out. We don't know yet. But I do wanna provide a different perspective as well, because it's important, right? So members help to make this show happen. We read our members' comments and we take them to heart. Stiff Upper Lib writes in and says, here's how I see it. There are not enough progressives in Congress. I'm sorry, but the numbers are not there. I just do not think that Biden had much of a choice about the infrastructure bill, meaning he didn't have much of a choice but to essentially concede to what the Republican senators were demanding. Too many Republicans, along with 2 demos, we know who they are, were blocking any chance for a $2 billion bill to pass. It's their fault, not Biden's. So that's certainly a perspective that gets represented quite a bit in corporate media and also legacy media outlets like the New York Times, for instance. It's important to share that perspective here as well and talk about it. Emma, do you want to weigh in on that perspective? Do you think that Biden really had no choice but to just kind of concede to Republicans here?
Well, I mean, I think it's a fair statement. I do think it's fair because we don't necessarily know how touchy Manchin and Sinema are behind the scenes. I mean, Sinema's a psycho. Manchin is at the very least, you understand what he wants. He wants to appear like he's owning the libs and being a renegade in and of himself, just to kind of carve out a specific niche in West Virginia. But I don't agree. I think a lot of what Biden does, being a creature of DC, is a bit masturbatory, not to be gross about it. But I mean, this entire process, as you say, Anna, of reaching a bipartisan consensus, it's only meaningful because he ascribes meaning to it, and DC ascribes meaning to it. Is it bipartisan in how the American people view it? No. I mean, the original infrastructure package was around 80% in terms of approval. I mean, that's just not the reality. It's bipartisan in the office politics way. And why I say it's masturbatory is that we don't really care about that, though. And the American people certainly don't care about that. The American people don't care when things are bipartisan. They just want things to improve. And nobody's gonna remember anything about the bill being bipartisan if our infrastructure continues to crumble, even though they heard, wait, I thought Biden passed this massive infrastructure package. His legacy will be defined by the content of the bills he passes, not by the Senate processes that are plaguing him in the moment.
No, I don't know, Emma. I mean, I do see massive groups of people discussing the importance of maintaining the legislative filibuster in the Senate. I mean, it's big water cooler conversation these days. Everyone's really talking about.
Oh, because what would the Republicans do? What would the Republicans do if you took away? I'm sorry, just really quickly. What would they do if you took away the filibuster? All they care about passing pertains to economic policy, tax cuts. They can already do that through reconciliation. So getting rid of the filibuster does nothing for them. What will they do? Pass a bill saying, oh, critical race theory is bad? Who cares? This is what we need to do. It's urgent. And I just had to put that out there because they've exhausted all their cards with the filibuster.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, well, we got to take a break. When we come back, though, we're going to discuss, honestly, a pretty shocking moment between the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, General Mark Milley, and Congressman Matt Gaetz. It's probably one of my favorite videos of the year. You don't want to miss it, so come right back. This music just makes me want to lay out by the pool, drink a margarita, have a good time. But I'm at work. I love being at work, I swear, but sometimes I do want to lay by the pool. All right, let me read a few more of our member comments. Tamara writes in and says, Anna and Emma are, oh, this is sweet, fantastic role models and examples of journalistic integrity. Young girls can look up to them and know they can aspire to greatness, good things. Thank you, that was really, really nice. And yeah, that's really nice. I mean, I'm in this position because I looked up to Anna, so. Don't say that, it's so embarrassing. Yeah, I just don't see myself that way. So whenever anyone says that to me, I feel like, especially you, Emma, you're amazing. But thank you for that. It's really nice. And well, you know, I want to make you uncomfortable. I'm definitely there. All right, someone who likes Bernie Sanders in our members section also says, countdown to Fox News claiming the DC bridge collapse was a false flag orchestrated by Biden to gain support for the infrastructure bill. You think they won't? You think they won't? Sexy Speed Racer says, likely GOP response to DC. You guys love like making predictions about ridiculous things the GOP is gonna say. Likely GOP response to the DC pedestrian bridge collapse. We need more deregulation of the trucking industry. Colorado Blue Blazer Regular says Biden and his cohort are trying to confuse the killer rabbit, AKA Republicans, by instantly running away, cowards. Special thanks to our new YouTube members, Torrential Rage and Nicole Smith. Thank you so much for being members and helping to support our programming. You guys make the show happen, and I hope you guys enjoy our bonus episode today. Moving over to our Twitch community, give you guys a little love. Progressive NCO, 8 months, tier 2. A power panel with only 2 members, of course. Thank you to Mini Morpho for the raid. Thank you, that's awesome. Also, Daisy Dragon gifted 5 subs and gave 1,000 bits. Holy Beer Dragon gifted 5 subs. Barkley T gifted a sub. Blue Tech, the Belgian Dragon, gifted 5 subs. I'm gonna totally butcher this name, I apologize. Swarpian gifted 5 subs. Swifty gifted 5 subs. Ash Maniel, 12 months tier 1 with the comment, a year of COVID. Thanks for keeping me somewhat sane. Also good to see Emma on the main show. And we got 30 seconds left, so I'm gonna scroll up and read from our super chats. Undecided has a fact check for me from yesterday's show. I have to correct Anna on that Notorious B.I.G. line. When he said Cubans with the Jesus piece, he was talking about a Cuban link necklace, not actual Cubans. You're probably right, but based on how excited my husband gets every time he hears that lyric, I'm just gonna go with what I believe. Okay, the alternative facts. Good
song.
Welcome back to TYT. I need to tease our bonus episode today, starting with a super chat comment from Ted Cruz Wedgie Dragon, who writes in and says, gotta give love to TYT and Majority Report for rubbing more ice on Crowder's toesies. That made my week. Plus, I got a surprise raise this week. Congratulations, Wedgie Dragon. That's amazing. Ted Cruz Wedgie Dragon, let me be specific.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm super excited for your raise, but also in our bonus episode today, you think I'm not gonna talk about the whole Steven Crowder thing with Emma? Of course I am. Of course.
I mean, are you joking? It's all I've thought. I've literally had trouble sleeping this week because I keep thinking about it.
I didn't realize how much I needed that. It totally changed the tone of the rest of the week. So
and how much work went into it, where we had to pre-record the show and pretend it was live, and it all paid off so well. Okay,
bonus episode, okay? So become a member, click that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. For now though, we're gonna get to our next story. So, during a House Armed Services Committee hearing to discuss the budget for the Pentagon in 2020, or 2022, I should say, Matt Gaetz decided to essentially use it as an opportunity to continue fighting on with the latest right-wing culture war talking point. This time, of course, about critical race theory, seemingly the only thing right-wing media and right-wing lawmakers care about as Americans are literally suffering with poverty, with illnesses, with homelessness, and a whole host of other issues that they'd rather not discuss. So what exactly did Representative Matt Gaetz ask to Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense? Let's watch.
In my previous discussions with service members and particularly officers, the number one issue that they raised to me with concern, often unable to speak publicly for fear of the type of retribution that Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer faced, they say that your stand down regarding extremism did not help our military, it hurt the military. And I want to share with you that perspective, that it caused service members to otherize one another. It impaired group cohesion. And interesting to me is that I've heard those sentiments most frequently from units that are majority minority. How should the Department of Defense think about critical race theory?
So that was the question. It's important to understand how he framed it. Lloyd Austin did answer the question. I think he gave a pretty great answer. But what really got a lot of attention, by the way, he asked that question to Lloyd Austin, who's black. I think that's a relevant part of the story, right? So here's Matt Gaetz essentially continuing on with his incredibly ignorant and uneducated theories about critical race theory, something that he knows nothing about. The right wing oftentimes will get asked what critical race theory is, and they never have an answer because it's not really about the substance of the matter. It's about engaging in the culture war to distract from everything else that's going on in the country because they have no solutions, people. We all know this. What really got a lot of attention was how the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, responded. Let's take a look.
On the issue of critical race theory, et cetera, I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university. And it is important that we train and we understand. And I wanna understand white rage, and I'm white, and I wanna understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders, now and in the future, do understand it. I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed that there were laws in the United States, antebellum laws prior to the Civil War, that led to a power differential with African Americans that were 3/4 of a human being when this country was formed. And then we had a Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation to change it. And we brought it up to the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It took another 100 years to change that. So look it, I do want to know.
Wow. I wouldn't have expected that exchange. Obviously, I'm very critical of the military and and when I say military, not the soldiers, but specifically what the Pentagon and the State Department has engaged in over the last several decades, the insane amount of our money and resources going toward a bloated Pentagon budget. But that exchange was pretty incredible. And Emma, before I go to you, I just want to indulge the audience in a moment that was just so nice to see. One more video for you.
And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed.
That was an open-handed slap, boy. That's what that was. That was Mark Milley, General Mark Milley, shutting down the ridiculous right-wing talking points that get recycled over and over again among GOP lawmakers and, of course, in the right-wing media. Emma, what do you think?
Well, I mean, it was incredibly gratifying, right? Look at that big head shaking itself. I mean, I obviously I'm in favor of a lot of what was said there. And I think the thing about critical race theory and the way you need to understand it is that it's really just a placeholder for Republicans to talk about any type of education that doesn't indoctrinate young people to being good little white capitalists who don't really question anything.
Right.
And don't question their place in the world and don't question why their black or brown classmates don't feel a certain way. And as you said, no one really understands what it is. And so anybody who may be on the fence, to hear that coming from somebody in the military uniform, it has an authoritativeness, and it's not, some DSA member, not saying that in any pejorative way, but it's somebody who holds that position and doesn't traditionally speak that way. I think it really does have a lot of value. And it's a good thing that someone like him is saying these things, because not just because critical race theory is just this entirely manufactured BS by Fox News that they forced into the national conversation, as they often do, where they've decided that this tests well. I mean, this is how they do things. They test it with a focus group. This triggers a certain amount of Republicans or some of their viewers, and then they decide to run with it, and that's what they've done. And then it goes downstream, and you have someone like Matt Gaetz asking these questions of government officials, which is just not at the forefront of anything that should be asked in terms of relevance to the American people. But also because then you get people like Laura Ingraham who are turning on the woke CIA and that other thing. That's what Tucker Carlson is. And maybe we should defund the military because this is how they feel. Deal. You are triggering the libs so much that it pains me to say that, right? You would really hurt my feelings if you cut military spending and cut from the CIA and cut from the FBI. You would trigger me so hard, Laura Ingraham, if you were to do that. I mean, please don't.
Yeah, I mean, and just going back to what you said about the authoritative nature of, General Mark Milley making that statement. No, the thing that makes it so powerful is that it's an individual coming from an institution that the right wing has spent decades and decades portraying as one of the most important American institutions, a powerful part of American identity. I mean, if you dare to criticize the Iraq War, remember the talking point that we would hear from the right wing was that you're not supporting the troops, you're not supporting the military, they're fighting for our freedoms. I mean, It's happened recently with Colin Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem to call out brutal policing in this country. The response from the right wing was, oh, you're being incredibly disrespectful to our military, to the soldiers who put their lives on the line to fight for our freedoms. And so to hear a person that represents that very institution essentially slap down Matt Gaetz and the rest of the GOP in their nonsense about critical race theory and their obsession with the culture wars was, yes, incredibly gratifying and certainly more powerful than what we would see in a tit for tat type debate in cable news, right, between two figures. So I love seeing that, and I especially love to see Matt Gaetz' disappointment and his shaking head. Hopefully he can shake his head to prison once we know what the true details are about the federal investigation he's facing for potential sex trafficking of a minor. He's being investigated for that. Let's not forget that point. Pretty sure he wants to distract from that as well. Well, when we come back from the break, I think it's worth giving you a little of Laura Ingraham's reaction to that exchange and what her threats are, which oddly enough, I'm totally into. We'll be right back.
I'm Nina Turner, and we are on the road to revolution, baby. Hello, somebody. And I know sometimes people talk about the angry black woman, but I'm gonna tell you something. If you ain't mad as a mofo about what's going on here, something is wrong with you.
People ask me all the time, what are the lessons from 2020? Is that progressives have to get more organized and we got to come together. We have to be as agile as neoliberals. The progressive movement has to understand that it's not just enough for us to have the right ideas. We are right on most of the ideas. We're not perfect, but we're 99% right because it is a humanitarian agenda, but we must get the power. We have to come together in a more unified way so that we utilize our power strategically to topple neoliberalism, and it's gonna happen.
Hi, I'm John, and I'm new to TikTok, but about 3 years ago, I started my daily political news show, The Damage Report, because I noticed this trend where every morning I was waking up to this tsunami of news that was just generally dreadful and horrifying and shocking, and I thought that if I could spend my time helping people to navigate this, serving as a bit of a life raft, pointing out which news is important and why, there are worse ways to spend your day. We're not an average news show, and we don't want our TikTok presence to be average either, so feel free to let us know what you'd like us to do on the platform, and maybe give us a follow at The Damage Report.
All right, Amazon Prime members, here's how you can subscribe for free on Twitch. Start by linking your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, and then click that little subscribe or resubscribe button below the stream on Twitch. Scroll down and select the subscribe free with Prime button, and then you're finished. Close out immediately and share your little subscription alert with the chat. Send a cute message along with it and bathe in the sweet, twitchy Bezos-funded love. Hashtag Bezos Bucks.
Hey everyone, Mateo Scarapore here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, who's real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says no. This man named Rhett Daniels, who's the CEO of a startup called Someone, located on the 36th floor of the same building, is impressed. And he invites Darren upstairs, and then he extends an offer to join his elite sales team. Darren reluctantly joins, and he soon realizes that he's not the only black salesperson there. He's the only black person in the entire company. So he goes through hell and back in order to make it to the top. And once there, he has status, money, power, but he says, you know what? I don't like being the token black guy. So he hatches a plan to help other people of color infiltrate America's tech startup sales teams, redefining what it means to be a minority in the workplace. This book definitely, if you couldn't tell, touches on many things that are relevant to this moment that we're all living in right now. But it's also connected to the many moments in history that have come before today. I hope that you read it. I hope that you enjoy it. And if you want to order a copy, go to shoptyt.com. Thank you, be well, and happy 2021.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and Emma Vigeland with you. Everyone check out Emma's work over at The Majority Report. Emma, you want to do a little plug?
Yeah, you guys can see it's called The Majority Report. Sam Seder and I do the news every day, except on Thursdays I host solo. So if you want to see a little bit more of me and less of that old guy, then definitely tune in on Thursdays. Although if you saw the epic Crowder thing, I mean, Sam is a legend. He's really just a completely fiend for this stuff, the debate stuff, and he really got Crowder. You can check it out there. And then we're also on the Peacock app, which is an NBC app. We do an exclusive show with them where I interview journalists for a long period of time. It's more of a podcast format, and there are a lot of really fascinating interviews on there. So check that out too. It airs at 5 p.m. and then the Majority Report's on Eastern. Majority Report airs on there at 10 p.m. Eastern, and the exclusive show you can find on demand. On demand too.
Your point about the interviews is a good one, because just last night I was watching Sam do an interview with someone who had written an op-ed about NATO. And it was great. It was actually a really interesting perspective. So everyone go check out the channel. Lots of really great content there. And yes, there are actually many debates throughout the years that are posted on that channel. I was actually watching one from, I don't even know. Sam Seder looked like he was in his 30s when it happened, but he was debating a libertarian caller. And I know the channel's littered with libertarian callers who think they can challenge Sam and then they regret that decision. So definitely check it out.
Yes.
Also in our super chat section, HKN wrote in and said this: just wanted to send some support to the TYT team. Can't wait to watch the bonus episode where you eviscerate brave Steven Crowder for his courageous retreat. So we are gonna be doing that in our bonus episode for our members. Become a member by clicking that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. Let's move on to the second half of the Matt Gaetz story, because the GOP reaction has been pretty hilarious. So Laura Ingraham is not pleased with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that's General Mark Milley, who did not like Representative Matt Gaetz's ridiculous culture war-based question about critical race theory. Now, the way that General Milley responded is what Laura Ingraham is unhappy about. So just to remind you all of that moment, here's how it went down.
And I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our commissioned, non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke or something else because we're studying some theories that are out there. That was started at Harvard Law School years ago, and it proposed.
So that was, it was just such a gratifying moment, and you should check out our previous video on the topic where we have a more in-depth discussion about the back and forth. But Laura Ingraham didn't like it, and in fact, had eventually reached a position that we can actually get behind. Maybe there is potential for bipartisan agreement in this country. Watch.
We are sending our tax dollars to this military to an attempt to weed out so-called extremists, which just means conservative evangelical, as far as I can tell. We're paying for that? Why is Congress not saying we're not going to give you a penny until all of this is eradicated from the military budget? Nothing. This is my offer to you. Nothing. That's what I would say. I am totally outraged by him and his ridiculous response today. Go after their budget. The only thing they understand is their budget, their money.
Laura Ingraham wants to talk to the general manager of the military right this minute. She is outraged, Emma, outraged. Can you believe that our resources are going to the military? She had no idea, but now she knows and she's threatening military funding, and I say bravo, bravo.
That Karen wants a refund. And she's not gonna follow up, unfortunately. Like, I wish this was so much more in good faith, because yes, then there could be bipartisan agreement here. It's the same thing with the Tucker Carlson, oh, the CIA is woke all of a sudden, we really need to re-examine these institutions. Yes, the woke CIA that's responsible for toppling countless governments throughout the globe and has killed tens of thousands of people, innocent people, in order to prop up right-wing governments and defeat leftist ones because of communism. And then, yeah, the FBI, so woke in their assassination of civil rights leaders in the 60s and their attempts to get Martin Luther King to commit suicide. And the military as well, with their cover-up of sexual assault and their complete aiding and abetment of, the overthrow of governments and murder of innocent people. I say all of that just to preface that she's being completely disingenuous. It's the same way, as I mentioned Tucker Carlson before, where he rails against big tech, and the conservatives talk about how, we need to do something about big tech because they are way too woke and they are deplatforming Donald Trump and all of the conservatives that we like. Okay, so what is the next step? Us on the left, we actually do want to defund the military to a significant degree, and we want to end the military-industrial complex, and we want to end our foreign interventions. And in terms of big tech, we want to address it on an antitrust level. Is Tucker Carlson thinking about that? Is Laura Ingraham thinking about that?
Of course
no.
Not.
I mean, yeah, and really, my final point on this is it reminds me of some of the rhetoric we see online, not to get too into that, but where it's anti-establishment, right? But there's no ideological underpinning to it. I mean, for right-wingers like that, it is a right-wing underpinning. But when you criticize something and you don't have a solution that's moving the country in a progressive direction, then it's just flailing. And that's really what that is, right? So
totally. I mean, okay, so there's a serious point that I want to kind of unpack there, because what you just mentioned in regard to, I see it a lot with the anti-imperialist messaging on the left, where a lot of it is about moralizing. And first of all, moralizing is not a persuasive argument. It just isn't, right? So is going into other countries and toppling democratically elected governments wrong and immoral? Yes. But a ton of wrong and immoral things happen, and it doesn't persuade people to speak out or act against it. I think it's important to have a class analysis in why US imperialism or imperialism generally is a pretty awful thing, because what it is it serves as a redistribution of wealth and resources from workers to executives at the very top, right? So we are essentially paying to engage in these violent actions abroad to make other people rich, to make the elite richer than they already are. That's what is the actual issue, the foundation of US imperialism, right? You can moralize about it all you want, and if you say that it's wrong and bad and naughty, I agree with you there. But go further than that and try to understand the theoretical framework that makes the left resist US imperialism or speak out against US imperialism. So totally agree with you there. Obviously, that is not the analysis that's driving the commentary coming from the likes of Laura Ingraham. Laura Ingraham.
There's no analysis.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I'm sorry, Anna. I didn't mean to cut you off, but just that's the danger of reactionary politics, right? Is because it saps leftist movements and people who are actually trying to find a solution on that front in terms of US imperialism and ending the United States project of empire amongst, and big tech overreach, et cetera. And it dresses it up in populism And there are people on the nominal left who do the same thing, but then what is the solution? There always has to be a economic and policy-based solution to all of these things, or else it's actually quite dangerous, because somebody who watches that might think, oh, well, maybe she's in this fight with us. And in fact, she's not at all, right? So.
Look, it takes a special dum-dum to think that Laura Ingraham would ever be on the left side. So if
Tucker fooled a lot of people with that. So.
I know. Well, there are a lot of dum-dums in the world, unfortunately. But I do want to read a comment from our audience. This is from our super chat section. Dr. Zippy McScoots writes in and says, as a 3-time combat vet myself, it really pisses me off that a rich kid snob like Matt Gaetz would laugh at a general who is also a combat veteran. So thank you to our audience. I love hearing from you guys, so keep the comments coming. I'll promise to read as many of them as I can in our next social break. All right, well, let's move on to our next story, which might seem a little out of left field for this show since we focus mostly on politics, but I think this is an incredibly important story that's worth discussing. So, Britney Spears addressed the Los Angeles Superior Court regarding her long-running conservatorship, the conservatorship that put her father, Jamie Spears, in charge of nearly every aspect of her life. This has been in place since 2008, and it is the first time that we are now hearing from Britney Spears herself about what she feels about this this program and not having full agency of her life, of her finances. She said in this court hearing, quote, "I feel ganged up on, I feel bullied, and I feel left out and alone, and I'm tired of feeling alone." She said that she's being exploited and that she can't sleep, is depressed, and cries every day. The New York Times earlier this week had accessed some court documents that were not public previously, so we started to get a better sense of how she was feeling about all of this. And then soon after that, she had the court hearing and we got a few quotes from what she had to say. Spears also recalled one incident in which she didn't want to do an additional run of shows in Las Vegas. She felt relieved when her handler said that she didn't have to do the shows anymore, but suspected there would be consequences. Days later, Spears said her therapist told her that he heard she was being uncooperative. She said he then took her off her regular meds and put her on a lithium regimen. Spears said that she wanted to have another child. This is this is incredibly disturbing. Spears said she wanted to have another child, but has been forced to keep an IUD in place. Whether it's her finances, her own body, her mental health, the drug regimen she's on, she just has no control as a result of this, this agreement, this thing that she was forced into back in 2008 and hasn't been able to get out of. So Emma, I want to hear what you have to say about this, because for me, what really stood out was that she talks a lot about being exploited, that she is working and her earnings are being exploited by her father and people on her payroll. So there's a financial incentive for Jamie Spears to keep this, process the way it's been.
Well, not only is she paying for her lawyer, but she's paying for her father's lawyers and all of the lawyers involved. And this is a really heartbreaking story for so many reasons. First of all, free Britney, of course. And if you haven't seen the Hulu New York Times documentary on this, it's just the tip of the iceberg, because we hadn't heard from her in that amount of time, since 2008, essentially, outside of manicured or media appearances that were essentially mandated by her father so that she could keep making money and keep him rolling in the dough. And there are so many different intersectional elements that I think should be explored here. Oddly, I thought about Andrew Yang in this story a bit. Bear with me, because he in the New York primary was talking about how we need to essentially lock up these mentally ill homeless people against their will and bring back forced internment, because they were dangerous and they were an eyesore for people in New York. And that is such a draconian, awful policy where essentially people who have mental health struggles are forced to be prisoners of the state against their will without really any advocacy because they are powerless. And oddly, there's some similarities in the situation. I mean, Britney Spears obviously has a lot of money, but she had a well-documented mental health episode or some struggles back in the time when this happened, and she's never been able to get out of it. And the other element of this is patriarchy, because this would not happen to a male star of her caliber. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. broke into multiple homes and had a bunch of arrests, and then a few years later he was sober and he was back on his feet, and I'm happy for him, and he was doing a bunch of movies, and he's Iron Man and one of the richest movie stars ever. And I mean, I guess the third element of this too is the money and the greed that was so displayed by her family. I am sickened for her, and the IUD story also fits into the patriarchy too.
Yeah, I think you make great points all around. You know, just to quickly comment on the Andrew Yang moment, I did see that video, and he definitely did not articulate his point well, and it did come across as incredibly cruel. And to be sure, in California, that program of forced institutionalization of people with mental health issues was draconian, was awful. But what we're experiencing, at least in Los Angeles specifically, I can't speak to other parts of the country, is the pendulum swinging to the extreme opposite end of the spectrum, where you do get attacked. I mean, on 2 different occasions, I was attacked by mentally ill homeless people. I'm not saying that we should force them into being institutionalized, but right now the city is just kind of leaving it as it is, and people are getting attacked on a regular basis. So it's insane that we have these 2 extremes and can't come up with like a better program, a better idea in dealing with this. And of course, I mean, look, at the end of the day, the root issues never really get addressed, right? I mean, if you do have mental health issues, even if you have health insurance, it's really, really hard to have a plan that covers the mental health care that you need, right? A lot of people don't have health insurance at all, and so they might have undiagnosed mental health conditions, and then their situation devolves even further from there. So there are actual root causes and root issues that should be addressed that aren't addressed. And then you look at the Britney Spears situation, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the double standards are pretty clear. I do want to read a few excerpts from the New York Times reporting on this story. They write that she articulated she feels I always have a hard time with this word because I never use it, but she articulated she feels the conservatorship has become an oppressive and controlling tool against her, a court investigator wrote in 2016. The system had, quote, too much control. Ms. Spears said, according to the investigator's account of the conversation, too much, too much. Spears also informed the investigator that she wanted the conservatorship terminated as soon as possible. She is sick of being taken advantage of, and she said she is the one working and earning her money, but everyone around her is on her payroll, the investigator wrote. And also in 2019, Ms. Spears told the court that she felt forced by the conservatorship into a stay at a mental health facility and to perform against her will. I mean, it's just, it's sick. And you can see that just by the way she carries herself, by the fact that she's been so successful in her career, even after she had a very clear mental health episode in 2008, that she's good. She can take care of herself. She doesn't need to be under the control of her father, who seems to be exploiting her. But unfortunately for now, the hearing ended with no resolution. The Los Angeles Superior Court judge, Brenda Penny, said that Spears's remarks were courageous, and also said that she would have to file a formal petition asking for this program to end before she could render a decision. So hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel for Britney Spears. But it does bring up some pretty devastating questions about how we deal with mental health issues in this country, in the state of California, and why it is that it's taken this long for the courts to even pay attention to this.
And how complicit we all are in this. I mean, I just want to add, she was a full of life person. I didn't want to use that word incorrectly. And she was essentially beaten down by a society that sexualized her as a teenager, that forced her to be sexy, but like you're also a horrible role model and we're going to be entirely invasive in every part of your life. I mean, that part of the 2000s when there was this celebrity culture, it was sick and we all participated in it.
Oh yeah.
And we all have culpability in it, right? And I read those blogs, I read Perez Hilton, I feel deep shame. And so I think we all have to reckon with it as a society, how we treated her. And by all accounts, you know, I listened to Mariah Carey oddly speak about her. She's apparently the nicest person ever. And she was drugged with lithium and things that she couldn't control. And I feel immensely sorry for her. And, you know, there's so many different elements that we could talk about forever, but
I second that, and I thank you, Emma, for saying it, because you know, you're taking personal responsibility. I mean, I obviously have to take personal responsibility too, but my hope is that you know, people can see how culture has evolved. That's really important, and how the kind of comments about female celebrities and the kind of coverage of female celebrities that was incredibly popular back in the early aughts no longer stands today. There's a lot of resistance to it, and I'm proud of that evolution. And so we need to right those wrongs, and getting her freed from this situation and drawing attention to the unfairness and the exploitation she's dealing with is just scratching the surface of that. We got to take a break. When we come back, we have more news for you, including House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy getting punked by a teenager. You guys better be ready for a rapid fire round of member comments, starting with Spice Boy Wannabe, who says, this might sound weird or maybe not coming from my username, but girl power. So cool to see both Anna and Emma covering today. Thank you so much. I'm glad you guys are enjoying the show. Lieutenant Mac McGee also writes in and says, I absolutely promise you that no officer spoke to Gates and complained about anything. I mean, honestly, I thought that was already given, which is why we didn't even address like his lie there. The rest of the comment is, not in a million years would that have happened. Now he's bringing the military into his lies. Can't wait till he's in jail. I think I will write him letters. Free Puerto Rico writes in and says, Mark Milley's takedown of Matt Gaetz comes second only to Sam Seder's decimation of Crowder. Emma, does Sam Seder know what he delivered to the progressive movement this week? Like, he might be underestimating it.
I fully think he does, but he doesn't necessarily understand it outside of how happy it makes him. I mean, he is just like one of those unique human beings that he's just a machine about this stuff. I mean, he loves it more than anything.
He does. He does.
I'm in awe of it. It's very fascinating to me psychologically.
It's so good. Perpendicular Time says, Gates' disgust and contempt when he shakes his head is telling. This isn't a placeholder for him. He actually believes everything the general is saying is an abject evil. He may still understand what is actually being discussed and not just the theater, but he still finds it reprehensible. These people are dangerous. I mean, they're definitely dangerous. We saw what happened in the Capitol on January 6th, and we have a story later in the show that shows you just how dangerous they are in their rhetoric. GM Frazier says the GOP tactic of deflecting away from important issues by pointing to critical race theory, the China virus, and dangerous migrant caravans equals critical racism theory. I guess GOP gonna GOP. And by the way, China virus was in quotation marks, like basically quoting the nonsense that they say. All right, and we got a minute left. That's nice. We've got Emma, you're bringing the boys to the yard. We've got a bunch of new YouTube members. Fernando Cholometes, thank you for joining. Nathan Rimmer, Shamail Willis, Elaine Simpson, Michael Raywet, Andrea Estenson, JRT 8675339, Ryan Finlayson, Carlos, and Murphy. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you guys, I think it's because we're gonna talk about the Steven Crowder thing in the bonus episode. You guys better stay members, all right? I'm keeping an eye on you. I'm tracking you guys. You better stay members, all right? Anyway.
Yeah, but how do I read the comments? I don't have membership anymore because I'm not at the company anymore. I want to read what people say. I need a member. I gotta sign up.
You gotta pay, girl.
Sign up.
You gotta pay.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, let's get back to the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. Anna and Emma with you. I do want to read one quick comment in our super chat section from Humberto, who says, I do think finance has sometimes a good use, but I like TYT as well. How can we reform the industry from the inside? I think that's actually a really, really great question, which we're not going to be able to get into right now. But I do think it's important to see what's happened to Americans on a micro level. As soon as the economy shifted over to like a finance-based economy. That's why we see record consumer debt, stagnant wages. I mean, there are other factors that have led to stagnant wages, but I think that's actually a really, really great discussion. And who knows, maybe I'll get into a deep dive on that for the Jacobin show that I host that, makes room for that kind of format. So check that out. It's called Weekends on youtube.com/JacobinMag. It's the show that I host with Nando Vila every Saturday morning. I'm trying to get that changed. Let's keep it real. I need my Saturday mornings back, come on. But every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, all right, cool.
You're gonna have to change the name.
I know, okay, I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of inside baseball. I was like, let's do it on Fridays, like Friday nights or something, or like Friday evenings, not like too late Friday night. And we could still call it weekends, because I think Friday still counts as the weekend, right?
Yeah, Friday night's the weekend.
Kale's not buying it. That's the producer, but we'll see. We'll see.
Well, we need the gavel. We need the gavel soundboard situation, right? I mean, I think 2 to 3, so we win.
Can you imagine a TYT Supreme Court ruling on Jacobin's programming schedule? I'm sure they'd love that. I'm sure they'd really enjoy it. Anyway, all right. Well, let's get to our next story. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy got punked by a 19-year-old because he apparently doesn't know what ends up getting passed in Congress, when in reality, as a member of Republican leadership, he should be fully aware. So this all started after this was posted online. It was what looked like an ad from the IRS indicating that families would get a monthly check for each of their children until they turn 18. Now, we don't live in a fantasy world here in the United States or any type of civilized country that would actually provide a robust social safety net for children. So McCarthy should have already known that this wasn't a real policy that had been implemented. It was actually a piece of art that was put online by Tobin Stone, a 19-year-old college student. When McCarthy saw it though, he shared it and said this: infuriating. The IRS is literally spending taxpayer money to advertise a government handout. This is welfare without work requirements. I want children to starve. Also, I'm pro-life. These people.
What, like a?
What are we gonna do with these people, Emma? What are we gonna do with these people?
I don't know. And the thing about it too is, unfortunately, well, okay, I have 2 thoughts in my mind. One is this IRS obsession has been in vogue since, Reagan, right? Where the IRS was completely demonized, and it works because no one wants to pay their taxes. And so you're appealing to people's worst nature there. But part of me also feels like that's gone. That era of politics is gone. And I find Kevin McCarthy to be so supremely untalented that it doesn't shock me that he's, one, duped by this, and two, kind of just going back to the playbook. It's like, if you, I'm sorry, Anna, forgive me, this is a sports reference. It's like Mike McCarthy, right? He's a former head coach of the Green Bay Packers. He was notoriously incredibly simple with his playbook and ruined wasted much of Aaron Rodgers' career. Like, he's going back to basics. He's playing high school football and doing high school pass formations when he's the leader of the Republicans in the House of Representatives. That's how I feel about him, right? He's doing high school coach tactics when he's supposedly coaching on the NFL level.
While I may not know the analogy or understand the analogy fully, I will say that, you're right, because it's not even about agreeing politically. I mean, I think that we can both admit that there's a very clear difference in terms of skill and talent between Senator Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, right? I mean, Kevin McCarthy,
exactly.
Like Mitch McConnell actually, unfortunately for us, is a skilled tactician. Like, he knows what he's doing and he knows how to consolidate and use power. Whereas Kevin McCarthy is just like, I mean, what year is this? Is it 2003? I mean, does he think that it's a good play to speak out against a potential government program that would help families financially, especially after the economic turmoil of the coronavirus and all these businesses shutting down?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's such a good point too. When people hear government checks now, they're like, oh, great. I mean, that's awesome. It was almost so successful that if the pandemic wasn't so horrible and Trump's handling of it wasn't so sociopathic, it could have actually put Trump over the top. I mean, the election was too close for comfort as is, even though in the popular vote it wasn't. But if some states had flipped a certain way, who knows, right? And that's why Trump knew, I'm gonna sign my big name on these checks because it was a popular program. And so I'm not even exactly sure what the poster fully says there, but as long as people are seeing that, there's gonna be a positive connotation associated with it, especially in the wake of the checks. There we go, right. I mean, yeah, that sounds good to people in the year 2021, given what we just went through in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the reason why Biden's initial infrastructure proposal and the American Families Plan poll so well. They poll well because they actually provide programs that materially benefit and improve people's lives. It's amazing to me how stuck in the past McCarthy is, even in his political posturing, right? Because we're seeing that pattern or that trend of populist rhetoric coming from right-wing lawmakers. And those are the right-wing lawmakers we gotta watch out for, because they're actually paying very close attention to the temperature in the country and to what Americans are concerned about. It's just that they're using the rhetoric to hook American voters and then offer them absolutely nothing. They offer nothing more than nonsense arguments about Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss books and critical race theory and whatever, right? But there's still some Republican lawmakers like McCarthy that are like, huh, what? Names on checks? That might be a bad idea. Like, he's just not a smart guy. Not a smart guy.
But it has IRS in the poster, so
right.
Again, it's just, dude, come on, get into the 21st century at the very least.
Well, hopefully he's not watching this. I don't want to help him out. But I do like your point. Yeah. I know. All right, well, let's move on. Let's move on to just a fun short story about Rudy Giuliani's career, because we did finally get some news that I feel like we should have gotten literally months and months ago. So Rudy Giuliani and the law career that he's been boasting is in jeopardy because his law license, practicing license, has been suspended in New York. A prosecutor in Manhattan. As a prosecutor in Manhattan and a former mayor of New York City, you wouldn't think that his life would devolve to where it is today. But because of the fact that he was part and parcel of the election denials, because of the fact that he helped to aid and abet lies pertaining to the 2020 election, the fact that he incited some of the violence that took place on January 6th, all of that seemed to play a role in New York's decision to suspend his license. So this is temporary, but there is a possibility that it'll be made permanent. A New York court ruled that Giuliani made, quote, demonstrably false and misleading statements to courts, lawmakers, and the public at large in his capacity as lawyer for former President Donald Trump. He, of course, repeatedly lied about voter fraud. He wasted resources and the court's time by showing up to battle it out regarding the results of the 2020 election without a single piece of evidence indicating that there was voter fraud. They also argued that his lies helped fan the flames that led to the January 6th insurrection at the nation's capital. The Attorney Grievance Committee contends, they write, that respondents' misconduct directly inflamed tensions that bubbled over into the events of January 6th in the nation's capital. We conclude that respondents' conduct immediately threatens the public interest and warrants interim suspension from the practice of law pending further proceedings before the Attorney Grievance Committee. And one person who was not pleased about this was Andrew Giuliani, who was very upset on behalf of his daddy.
All 5 of them are Democrats, 3 of which were appointed by Andrew Cuomo. 5-0, ultimately. Democrats with 0 Republicans on there. Again, this is just unbelievable to see just how politicized all of this has become. I am infuriated by all of this, and any American that believes in an independent justice system, this is going after one of President Trump's closest allies. That's exactly what this is.
And that was Andrew Giuliani giving the audience a generous amount of headroom for that video. So Emma, thoughts on this? Is this nothing more than a political witch hunt?
I can only think about the headroom.
He might think that his head is similar to that of like Matt Gaetz. So he's just, there's like an issue going on over there. I mean,
okay, so he put it on top. We have the important news to discuss. He did not have one friend with him to record this video, so he's like, I gotta put it on top of a car. But he probably put the camera higher, right? Instead of when you turn it horizontally, he put it on the higher end as opposed to the lower one. I mean, dude, is this like a Wes Anderson movie? What kind of framing are you doing here? It doesn't need to be like this. It makes you look really short and small, and we already know what your gene pool looks like.
Oh my gosh. Okay, look, but serious point here. We'll clown on Andrew later. Why did it take so long? I mean, this guy was a practicing lawyer up until literally today. And with everything that transpired following the 2020 election, all the lies, all the incitements, all of the, by the way, he's facing a federal investigation in regard to his business with Ukraine. His home and his office got raided by the feds. I mean, I would argue, I could be wrong, Emma, but I would argue that lawyers who don't have tidy or cozy relationships with people in positions of power do not get this much leeway as they're making these massive, terrible decisions with their licenses.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And it is another example of the powerful being held to different rules than everybody else is. And especially somebody who was the former mayor of New York, right? And despite his public meltdown, he still has a lot of clout just because he was mayor on 9/11. And I know that's hard for people to fully grasp, but it's the same way there are still people in the state who give Andrew Cuomo credence and kind of brush aside the COVID death cover up in nursing homes or the sexual harassment and assault allegations because he was governor during COVID and we saw him on TV. I mean, there's a lot of that involved. But I think at a certain point, the guy's a raging lunatic, standing aside Sidney Powell, going to Four Seasons Landscaping to do a press conference for Donald Trump. His hair's melting off, his spitting everywhere. I mean, with every word, there's just spittle all over the place. He's a raving lunatic, and the fact that he still had his license was unfortunate and a menace because he started ostensibly using it as Trump's lawyer.
Yes.
So it's fine if he's kind of, hibernating and not using it, and he's just active in political life and going on TV or whatnot, and he's not practicing. But he was involved in legal proceedings with Trump, at least representing him. So, okay, this guy has done numerous things and been involved in numerous criminal probes. It's time to at least suspend it at the very least.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Well, we got to take a break. When we come back, though, I think we need to talk about some of the violent incitements we're seeing on places like OAN. They're literally calling for executions, and everyone's asleep at the wheel as it's happening. It's insane. So we've got that story and more for you when we return. Come right back. Special thanks to our new members, Champagne Comunista, Ryan Hankey, and Melon Lord. Thank you so much for becoming new members. We're gonna have a great bonus episode today. I'm gonna do a rapid fire round of our super chats, and hopefully I can also do some, you know what, I'm gonna start with Twitch subs. Portland writes in and says, Portland Belosaurus says, so much love and appreciation to everyone at TYT, 6 months Prime. Thank you. Camilla's Dragon gifted a sub, and also Saya gave 1,000 bits. Here's the comment. Thank you so much for the bits, by the way. If you guys want a good review video of Sam Cedar and Steve Crowder, watch the Observe YouTube 1. He is a nonverbal analyst, or does nonverbal analysis. I'm not the biggest believer in body analysis, but it's interesting, and he explains Steven Crowder so very perfectly. So definitely check that out. It's a recommendation from one of our Twitch viewers. From our super chat section, Nicole Smith, who's a new YouTube member, thank you so much, writes in and says, in regard to the Britney Spears story we did, serve the conservatorship of her father, or sever the conservatorship of her father, appoint a temporary conservator not related to Britney until the legalities are settled. No more money for daddy. So her finances, there was a battle about that. Unfortunately, her father still pretty much controls everything. But in regard to her finances, that has been somewhat shifted over to a third party. It's like a wealth management company, but that doesn't sound so great either, but thank you for writing in and sharing your perspective. Sentinel writes in and says, why does Gates look like a real life quagmire? He does. Franklin wrote in, we've got a poem, so I'm gonna go ahead and read it. Yay, Walton, don't mean to store, all right, yay, Walton, don't mean the store. Hold on, guys. Stop writing while I'm reading this because it's like distracting me. Okay. Yay, Walton, don't mean the store. That would be something I'd abhor. Emma and Anna, what a treat. Only thing missing is some Domino's. Yes, Domino's to eat. Yes, Franklin. Yet with ratty news in every town, no one's sure. Not so sure I could keep it down. So I love that you found a way to put my favorite pizza in the equation because
that's your favorite pizza.
Yes, Emma. Yes, it's my favorite pizza. Okay, New Yorker. I don't want to hear about how good New York pizza is. Domino's is the best. I don't care. They're not a sponsor. I'm not doing a plug for money. I genuinely love Domino's. Don't judge me.
Just
get off it.
No, I'm genuinely reevaluating our friendship. Goodbye.
We'll talk about it. But we got to get back to the show. Thank you so much for writing in, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Anna Kasparian and Emma Vigeland with you. I want to get to the next story immediately because it's an important one to discuss. It's a trend that we've been seeing in right-wing media and it just continues to get more and more extreme. So an OAN host by the name of Pearson Sharp unleashed in what honestly can only be described as a rant meant to incite violence pertaining to the results of the 2020 election. I really have no other way of describing this. And so all I can really do is go to the video and have you judge for yourselves. Take a look.
How many people were involved in these efforts to undermine the election? Hundreds? Thousands? Tens of thousands? How many people does it take to carry out a coup against the presidency? And when all the dust settles from the audit in Arizona and the potential audits in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Wisconsin, what happens to all these people who were responsible for overthrowing the election? What are the consequences for traitors who meddled with our sacred democratic process and tried to steal power by taking away the voices of the American people? What happens to them? Well, in the past, America had a very good solution for dealing with such traitors: execution.
He's calling for executions in a situation in which 28% of Republicans already think that they need to resort to violence to take the country back. This is according to new polling. We already saw what happened in the nation's capital. Homicides and gun violence are spiking throughout the country because so many Americans purchased guns during the coronavirus pandemic. So are there any limits to what, I guess people can just incite. Inciting violence is not protected under the First Amendment, by the way. Like, you can't go around calling for executions of innocent people because you didn't like the outcome of an election. But you have OAN spewing this garbage and this insanely irresponsible rhetoric on a regular basis. That was the most extreme example I've seen. But I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting. Emma, what do you think?
No, you're not overreacting. I mean, that's on cable news. Yeah. I have cable. I mean, I scroll past OAN a good amount, and I marvel at it. They are on television. They are a part of the programming that some multinational telecommunications companies find acceptable. Do you find it acceptable that a host on that network is calling for executions of people who they say are traitors, people who just accept that the democratically elected results, or the democratically elected president, Joe Biden, is the president? And so much of that was projection there too, right? I mean, what do you do with traitors who try to interfere with our electoral process, right? That's what you guys did. You were the ones who tried to storm the Capitol and stop the vote count from being officially tallied, as we see here in this footage. You're the ones that were chanting "Hang Mike Pence," because he was simply not going to overturn the election results due to Trump's whining. One, it goes to show to me just how effective the seeds of someone like Roger Stone's propaganda has been. He has been saying "stop the steal" for years now. That was a part of his effort in the Bush v. Gore election. That's what they were chanting as they conservatives banged down the doors at the behest of Roger Stone in Miami-Dade County. He continued that effort with Donald Trump, who ate it up. And his narcissism just spread that kind of propaganda like a virus, so that you have sycophantic news stations like OAN that are broadcast on cable television, which gives it the air of legitimacy, saying things like that. That's incredibly dangerous. And as you say, in terms of polling, 1/3 of Americans think some amount of election fraud or interference is the reason that Joe Biden is president or contributed to his victory. So just take that amount of people, and then even a small percentage of it, they're gonna believe that. And that's incredibly dangerous. I mean, these cable companies that have OAN now have culpability. If they want to have their own website like Steve Bannon or Alex Jones or whatever the case may be and broadcast it there, do whatever you want. But this should not be on television platforms like this. It's incredibly dangerous.
Absolutely, and there used to be, federal regulations in place pertaining to news media, and that was called the Fairness Doctrine, right? So one of the best provisions of the Fairness Doctrine, which by the way, I did a lengthy detailed segment on for Jacobin, check that out at youtube.com/JacobinMag. One of the most important provisions, in my opinion, of the Fairness Doctrine was the equal time provision, which indicated that if you were gonna do any type of coverage on a political figure, a public figure, whoever, you needed to first inform the individual that you were gonna do the coverage, but also offer equal time for that person to provide his or her perspective or his or her point of view. And so that helped to keep the coverage fair and also prevented the polarized, one-sided approach to news that we're seeing right now. So when Ronald Reagan essentially defanged the Fairness Doctrine, he paved the way for Rush Limbaugh. I mean, Rush Limbaugh's career exploded after that. And the situation in the right-wing media certainly has now devolved to the point where you have programming on cable news calling for executions as a result of an election result they don't like. And by the way, he mentioned, he's pretending as if these audits are gonna change the results of the election. Homeboy, like Georgia did 2 hand counts. And actually after doing the hand counts, they found out that Joe Biden had more votes than they previously thought. Dozens more votes than they previously thought. So it didn't go in the direction he was hoping for. He's bringing up the Arizona audit as if that's changing anything. They lie about what transpired not only during the election, but in the aftermath of the election. And then they just plant the seed of rage and fear in the American people and essentially give them a green light in using violence. I mean, it's just, how is this okay? It's not, we know it's not. But the question is, like, why isn't anything being done about it? Look, I believe in free speech and I believe in a free media, obviously. But inciting violence is not protected under our Constitution. And it's incredibly irresponsible at a time when we're literally swimming with guns. We have people who have undiagnosed mental health conditions, can't get the treatment they need because of our broken healthcare system. I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster. And we've already had mass shootings that were fueled by the rhetoric we hear from the GOP. In El Paso, Texas, a gunman goes into a Walmart, guns down dozens of people because of Donald Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric and how it inspired him. Like, we've already lost innocent lives as a result of this irresponsible, disgusting rhetoric from the right wing. And it just continues on. It keeps getting worse, more extreme. Anyway, I just wanted to also give you this. Meanwhile, as Sharp contends that other audits will finally provide overwhelming proof of widespread voter fraud, a new report spearheaded by Michigan Republicans comprehensively debunks the array of false election claims made by Trump, his legal team, and other right-wing figures. The report even calls for the state's attorney general to consider investigating those who peddled false information about vote counts in the state to raise money or publicity for their own ends. And look, the grift, it just keeps on going. We see it everywhere. We see it certainly in the media. We see, people who are purportedly leftists spewing the same disgusting propaganda that we're seeing of the openly right wing. And just, please guys, question everything, question us, I don't care. I just want people to be more skeptical of what they hear from public figures, both online and on cable news. Bonus episode is next, Emma will join me, and yes, we are gonna talk about Steven Crowder and the inside story, don't miss it.
We are on to something that is going to be amazing, but what we need is your help.
The number one problem is there's too much power in too few hands.
Every single problem that we have can be traced back to dark money.
They take large donors, they serve large donors.
So these handful of gatekeepers try to dictate everything.
Like all of you already know, they don't work for you, they work for their donors. So fire them and hire people who will only work for you that say no corporate back money.
We are going to change the way we elect candidates in this country.
Uncorrupted Democrats, we're gonna fight for the issues and win on policy.
This is incredibly personal. We need free healthcare for everyone.
We're fighting for $15 minimum wage, single payer healthcare, debt-free college, and we are gonna get money out of politics once and for all.
I've taken a public pledge not to accept any corporate money.
Because the last thing we're gonna do is go into another presidential election and run a corporatist against a populist candidate.
At some point, the buck needs to stop, and it's gonna stop with us. It's gonna stop with Justice Democrats.
So who are we?
People who do not take corporate PAC money.
We're relying on small donors.
99.9% of our contributions came from people.
You're a Justice Democrat, so you don't take any corporate PAC money.
I'm not influenced by money.
As a Justice Democrat, I made that pledge.
Not a penny. Absolutely no.
I will go to Congress unbossed and unbought.
We try to create a government which works for all of us.
That is what America's about, and that's what a representative democracy should be about.
We are just getting warmed up here.
Vote for uncorrupted Democrats. The fight starts now, it starts today, and it starts with you.
I've been honest with him, like, yeah, I was upset with you and I shouldn't have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
Did you know that more than 20% of the world's oxygen comes from the Amazon? Why? Because of trees. I know what you're thinking. Of course! So what do we want to do? We want to plant more trees so we can save the climate. It's quite literal. So that's what leads to our new partner, Plant Your Change. Love it. It's so easy. What they do is you take the credit or debit cards you already have and you plug it into the system. And if you so choose, you get to round up every purchase to the nearest dollar and they plant a tree for you, okay? Now you could also choose if you wanna do it on only certain kinds of purchases or only so often, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But literally every cent makes a difference here. It's Plant Your Change. And if you wanna know more information, just go to tyt.com/trees. Let's go save the planet together.
Now, top. No. No.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information, and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
I now know the two teams that are in the Super Bowl.
Sure, John Warderola. That is enough with this segment, John. We have to go to break. Sure, John Warderola.
Emma, you're getting so much love in our member comments, our super chat comments. By the way, welcome to the bonus episode. Anna Kasparian and Emma Vigeland with you. I'm gonna read some of these comments because I always feel awful when I don't get through as many of them as I can. Kevin writes in and says, Emma, I hope you'll come back and host more shows with Anna in the future. You two are equal parts complimentary and badass together. Great fit. Yeah, I mean, I was really sad when Emma left, I'm not gonna lie, but also super excited about her career, and I think that you've been doing such a great job on Majority Report, Emma. You guys are good at bouncing your ideas off of one another, your perspectives off one another. It's a really great show. And I'm sure a lot of you are already watching it. But if you're not, check that out. It's called The Majority Report. Just Some Joe writes in and says, happy to see Emma on TYT. She's great on MR, Majority Report. Tyrannosaurus in F14 writes in and says, always more Emma Vigeland at TYT. Ray Turner, AKA the Bearded Dragon, says, great to see Anna and the Vig together again. So lots of love for you, Emma. You gotta come back soon.
I will, and I have to ask, Bart, did you put that remix together? Did the members hear that of me ripping on John? I don't even remember what I said. I know I said we have to go to break, but what was the first thing I said?
Yeah, the first thing you said was, all right, John, Ida Warlow, whatever, and then you said, all right, John, that's enough with that segment. Go to break. But yes, it did go out to everybody.
Yeah.
Miss you, Emma. I miss you a lot, my friend.
Well. Yeah, miss you too, Bart. How good to hear everyone's voices for sure.
All right, so before we get to the fun Crowder stuff, let's talk about this story. I wanted to do this in the main show. We ran out of time, but I was amazed at this line of defense by one of the Capitol rioters. Because you have to really be shameless to use this as a defense in a court of law. And this woman did it. She did it. She went for it. So let's talk about this. So, I'll wait for that B-roll. That sweet B-roll. There it is. All right. No, wrong one. We don't want to incriminate that poor woman. That woman was actually great. Let's go to the other. Do we have B-roll for Jay? We'll do it live. All right. So, an Indiana woman who took part in the Capitol riots on January 6th had an interesting line of defense as she's being prosecuted for her role in the riots. Anna Morgan Lloyd, who's 49 of Indiana, cited quotes from the films Schindler's List and Just Mercy in her letter, saying that her attorney told her to watch the movies and learn what life is like for others in our country. So her argument in her defense is, listen, I watched Schindler's List, and now I am a new person. I now know what Jewish people had to go through, and so therefore, please don't give me any prison time. It's an amazing story. She says this, I've learned that even though we live in a wonderful country, things still need to improve. People of all colors should feel as safe as I do to walk down the street. Look, if it's actually true, and watching Schindler's List, which was honestly a difficult movie to watch, but was also an excellent movie, if that really does have a profound impact on her and helps her to see how white supremacy and anti-Semitism is a bad thing, great. That That defense isn't going to hold up, though, in a court of law. It's just not. So, Emma, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I would imagine that she's okay. So she's trying to reduce her sentence, right? So she's going to use any kind of defense that she can find. But honestly, it doesn't shock me. I mean, you'd be surprised. I think there are a lot of and not you, but just the audience in general. I think a lot of people would be surprised at how insulated white people are in terms of their own media consumption. And it's not just news media. It's like what shows you watch. I mean, there are a lot of people that don't see shows with Black people in them or with maybe even Jewish people in them represented in any meaningful way. Sure, they'll watch Friends, and in season 10, Ross dates a Black girl, and whoop-de-doo, right? But nothing that centers Black stories or the Black experience or the Jewish experience or whatever, or the Latino experience or the Muslim experience. That's incredibly missing on TV. And so everybody's starting from their own point. Not everybody's starting at the beginning of the race or at the exact same starting point. It's 8:09 for me, so this is when my brain starts to melt. But yeah, I have to have empathy for her, because I have to believe that if she actually did watch those movies, and Just Mercy, which is a movie about a Black person, which I don't think is directed by a Black person, by the way, but that maybe it inched her closer to the finish line or made her a little bit more empathetic. I have to believe that, or else, what are we all doing here?
Yeah, no, you make such a great point, Emma, and thank you for that, because that's the mature point to make. I was just amused that the defense was used in this court, and prosecutors, of course, aren't buying it. But you're right. Look, I do think that people are certainly able to evolve. I don't think that people are inherently evil. And so we don't know what her environment is like, right? And clearly she watches a lot of right-wing news. And if you're in an ideological bubble, you're essentially insulated from really learning about what other people have had to endure, or what the reality is of the history of this country, for instance, right? So it's just such a great point, and you're right. I mean, there's really no point in discussing social justice and race relations and history in this country if we genuinely don't think that people can change. So you're right about that. Now I'm gonna go back to making other silly points. So there was a photo of her in the Capitol as the riots were going down. I want to share that photo with you. It was published by Dead State. So the woman who has the red circle around her face, she's the one from Indiana who's using this defense in court. But as I was looking at that image, what came to mind to me was, I don't know, sometimes I feel like there's just like some middle-aged moms who have been like raising kids that, they're most of their adult lives, and they're just like, I don't know, man, I want to have fun. Let's go to DC. Let's stir some shit up. I look at that image and that's what I think. I don't know, I could be wrong. Like, they're having the time of their lives.
There's something about her face that's so innocent. I don't know how soft we're getting in our old age, geez. But I mean, like in our, I think just in terms of us consuming the news, sometimes we have to have less of a cynical perspective, but there is just something sweet about her face. I don't really know. And I keep being reminded, we had an interview on the show, the Majority Report the other day, someone who cited this stat from the Southern Poverty Law Center that only 8% of high school seniors could identify slavery as the primary or as the cause of the Civil War, the central cause.
8%?
Yeah.
High school students?
High school seniors of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And that's
Jesus.
Part of just, and I just went to clarify that because I wanted to make sure I remembered it correctly. And it was published in US News and World Report in 2018. So that's verified, and that was what was done by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a reputable nonprofit. So the point is that there is an immense amount of ignorance in this country, and there are a lot of people who don't leave their towns, who marry their high school sweethearts. There's nothing wrong with that, that kind of stuff, and who are insulated and isolated. And I don't know why. It's just different for me than these like this QAnon shaman or somebody who's just like a lot more rabid in their obsession. And I don't know anything about her. She could be a horrible person, but
yeah, actually, so I think the reason why I have that theory about her is because she had posted that image online and it's since been deleted. And the caption said that it was the most exciting day of her life. And if that was the most exciting day of your life, like you've been stuck at home raising kids too long. Like you're looking for a little fun. I don't know. It's just, I'm obviously totally like making up all of this, right? She did say that it was the most exciting day of her life, and then she took it down.
Well, I mean, it's like she's like, we're having a good time, and so much of that QAnon stuff from moms too is, and not to bog us down in this, but it's centralized around, kids being outside the home. Oh, kids are gonna be molested by people we don't understand or know. And a lot of it's just internalized misogyny, which is, part of like this anxiety that people feel about the norms changing and children, they'll be molested by people in power, et cetera. So, who knows? I don't know. There's something about her face. I feel bad for her. What do you want me to say?
Well, you guys get to decide. You guys take a look at that photo. Do you feel a little sympathy for her? I don't know. Let us know in the comment section. But for now, we'll talk about someone we do not have any sympathy for, and that's Steven Crowder. Emma, I'm so excited to talk about this with you because, okay, let me first tell you guys how I found out about the whole Steven Crowder thing. I get a comment on one of my Instagram photos and it says, you're excited that Sam Seder caught Steven Crowder. And I was like, I don't know what that means. But as soon as I was on air as I got that comment. I'm like, I don't know what that means, but the second I'm off air, I'm gonna look it up. And so I go onto YouTube and Vosh he's live talking about it, and I was like, great. So I start watching, and luckily I caught it at the very beginning. And it was the best thing that had happened in a while. In terms of like, not in my personal life is great. In terms of like this space, right? Like online media, all of that stuff. We all needed a moment to bring us together, right? And I celebrated, I must admit. So tell us about it, the backstory, Emma. Give us the goods.
So, I mean, one, you guys can see the full play-by-play. This is my effective plug. On the Majority Report channel, we did a whole fun half dedicated to it, basically, because it was a big deal. And for people that don't know, Sam loves debating people, and it's not for any clout reason, really. I mean, that part's fun. But he really likes doing it because part of what we do at the Majority Report is talk about these online right-wingers because you get into their algorithm, and sometimes their fans actually watch the show and they go, wait, I'm gonna start questioning things. People don't realize how the Dave Rubins, the Steven Crowders, the Ben Shapiros, it is so insulated, and they keep it that way on purpose, and yet they scream, debate me, debate me, debate me. That's Steven Crowder's whole identity. He's the debate me meme, the guy sitting on the lawn chair debating random college students who he thinks he's smarter than, and that's the whole purpose of this, right? He in 2018 dodged a debate from Sam. Sam recorded the phone call. Apparently the woman didn't care, of the Politicon organizer who spoke to, you may have done this backstory on the show, who spoke to Steven Crowder when they were supposed to debate and said he got, quote, cold feet. And his father, his manager, backed out of the debate for him. There was another debate that Sam was supposed to do with Crowder on Gavin McInnes's show, and Crowder backed out when he found out Sam was doing that as well. So this was 2 times that Steven Crowder, the debate me bro, had backed out of debating Sam. Then we're all doing the show and Sam turns to me, he goes, this guy Ethan, he's got this huge this huge show called H3. I've never heard of it. I've never heard of it either. But he's huge, this guy. He's not a political guy. I think, he does stuff with Trisha, or did stuff with Trisha Paytas. I know that name, but I don't really know anything about her. And he reached out and said, Steven Crowder agreed to debate me, and we want to sneak you on and get this debate to happen, because Crowder would just not respond. And so bless this guy, because he's just a normal guy who has this YouTube show, and they got into a debate about vaccines, and he was just having a normal stance, like, you should get vaccinated, basically. And of course Crowder goes, oh, I'll debate this non-political commentator who doesn't follow this or doesn't do this, and felt really tough about that. And so the guy was like, I acknowledge I'm not a political, or Ethan said, I'm not a political commentator. Let's sneak Sam on because he knows what he's talking about. So you guys might know that backstory by now, but it really was a production to get it all together, and we had to kind of not tell anyone in the audience why a few Mondays ago we ended our show early, and we started an hour early because Sam pretended he had to do something else. We ended our show, and Crowder immediately drops out of this debate. Right?
Because he was monitoring you guys. He's so scared of Sam that he's monitoring your show to make sure that he doesn't get ambushed or
ambushed. And so that was what, and we said, no, there's no way. Because he said my wife had an emergency, or his dad, I'm sorry, said, that she had an emergency with her pregnancy, but we'll reschedule it for next week. It's a little weird when something dire could be happening. But Ethan goes, I think he's watching and saw that your show ended early. And Sam was like, there's no way. We were like, maybe.
Oh my
maybe.
God.
So the next Monday, he rescheduled it for noon Eastern, which is when our show starts. We come in all the way early and pre-record and pretend that the show is live, and we can't tell anybody about this. Because I don't know if people get, this is what Sam lives for. And so when Sam says we're gonna come in early to tape the show so I can accommodate potentially ambushing Steven Crowder, there's not gonna be a conversation about it. And I'm very happy to do it as well. So this is what this is gonna be. And so we taped the whole show, we pretended it's live, and then it all went down. And I sat right here, we only had the audio feed. I could just see Sam and hear them. And seeing it, after hearing it, was as you say, Anna, one of the most joyous experiences in my professional life.
Yes.
And I've done a lot of fun stuff with I can curse now. Done a lot of fun shit with the Ocasio-Cortez interview is one of the highlights of my career, and also her party, her victory party, and all of the fun stuff when we hanging out with you guys, drinking with you guys, doing that. Those are all such amazing times in my life. But that was also just an incredible professional experience, just witnessing Sam do that, because it was just so thoroughly embarrassing for Steven Crowder. I genuinely think he ended his career. I'm sure he'll make money and whatever, but he has no credibility anymore.
Look, what Sam Seder did to Dave Rubin has been mirrored in this experience with Steven Crowder. Look, I think that one of the best ways in fighting back against the grifty right wing on social media platforms and YouTube and all of that is to look, they say infuriating things time to time, right? And they do it because they want to see people upset. But clowning on them, I would argue, is a much more effective strategy, because first of all, they're clowns. How could you not clown on them? And it's better to embarrass them. Who wants to be a supporter of an embarrassing person? Steven Crowder's embarrassing, Dave Rubin embarrassing. And what Sam's been able to do with both of them in terms of making it abundantly clear that these are two embarrassing people, he bodied them, both of them. It's just amazing, I love it. But there was one moment that I feel like is so undervalued. And it's the moment when Steven Crowder's just like so nervous about being ambushed that in the very beginning, he's like, oh, he's looking over to the side. He's looking over to the side, like letting his team know, get the camera ready so you move off of me and go on to whatever co-host, I don't know what his co-host name is. Because he was somewhat expecting it. And the panic in his face when he's like, he's looking off to the side. It's just, I've watched that moment over and over again, just that moment alone.
And how he clutches his hands like he's like, if he lets go, his heart will stop. I mean, the dude was terrified. And the way that his voice shakes, my boyfriend goes to me, can we watch it again tonight when you get home?
Beta.
Yes, we can. Beta. We could keep watching Boardwalk Empire, but we could also just watch that whole Crowder thing again. I'm like, you know what? We're gonna do it. Like he said this to me too. Like, it's watching a bully get smacked. And Crowder likes to bully college students or people and act real tough and like, muscles and holster and whatever, right? Like he likes to, and we're in the members only, so I definitely think he has gay thoughts, and he's just so performative in his masculinity.
Totally,
is what I want to say.
Yes, I actually but I almost kind of want to get you off of this because it makes me feel really bad. Because I'm not a bad person, right? So even if it's someone
I shouldn't have said that.
No, but you're right. But you're right. Like I'm not being serious in telling you to stop talking about this. You're right in that there's something. He's overcompensating for something. I don't know what his sexual orientation really is. I don't even want to speculate about it. But the gun holster thing that he wears, obviously he's obsessed with his arms or something. He's overcompensating, there's no question.
He dressed up pretending he was trans to work out at Planet Fitness to see if they'd kick him out, and no one responded. He put on makeup and a woman's wig.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Emma, he doesn't ever miss out on an opportunity to cross-dress. I mean, he's cross-dressed to mock me, which I've never even really cared to see the video. He's mostly because he's just not funny. I have no problem laughing at myself, but he, interrupted Cenk's South by Southwest panel and didn't even have the planning to have a joke prepared or something. He just dressed up like Cenk and interrupted the panel, and that was it. People were like, boo. Are you gonna tell a joke or make this even a little funny? He's just not a funny guy, never misses an opportunity to cross-dress, is overcompensating with his masculinity, runs away from debates. His father has to intervene and prevent him from engaging in debates where he knows that his own son is gonna fail miserably. There's a lot of bad stuff going on psychologically with Steven Crowder.
I don't even feel bad though, because he's really harming the world and he's harming the country. And I mean, I don't know. And he went after Sam in some vaguely anti-Semitic way, and he said, "Oh, what are you, a woman?" I mean, there's a lot going on there, as you say, but not to make it not fun. It's just I don't know. I don't have a ton of sympathy for him at this point, when it's just it's become lucrative for him, so he's gonna keep being a bad guy.
So what do you make of, without naming names, some portion of the purported online left? And I say purported because I don't believe they're actually on the left, but the individuals who are not happy about how this went down. They think that Sam Seder is the bad guy in this equation. What are your thoughts on that?
I can't name names.
I mean, you can name names if you want. I didn't know if you wanted to, but I mean, I saw a little bit of it and I was like, does anyone even really believe that these people are on our side at all in any way at this point? Come on.
I didn't see, that's why I'm asking. I did any person, and did Jimmy Dore say something about this?
I don't know about that. I actually didn't see anything from him. He's blocked for obvious reasons. But no, more of these weird peripheral, I don't know, broadcasting from my mother's basement and we love the Boogaloo Boys so much. We're the true left. It's those people. I don't even know what their names are. I've just seen some of their videos. on Twitter.
Well, to me, they think, oh, we have a licensing deal with MSNBC, Anna, so you know that we've completely sold out, right? And Sam's a sellout. He's a shit lib. I'm a shit lib. I thought Warren wasn't, human feces and the devil all wrapped into one. So obviously, and I thought she was a clear second choice, but that means that I'm owned by Hillary Clinton for some reason. But I supported Bernie Sanders, and somehow Tulsi Gabbard is the one that the establishment was very afraid of. But I don't really know. It's all very convoluted. To me, it's just incredibly clear what it is. These people who used to identify with the left, the door types, and whatever barnacles are on his ass these days, like Mate or whatever the case may be. Just they have nothing to add except to back up their guy. Like they are appealing to a different audience than we are, and I think that was clear for a while, that they were not a part of the left, and their commentary is not steered towards the left, so I don't even feel like it's appropriate to refer to them in the same sentence. They are a part of a different audience, and so when they get their fans to come after you or me or whatever the case may be, it's the Green Party people filtered into the Tulsi people, filtered into the right wing, filtered into like some kind of vaguely Q thing. We're anti-imperialists, but like we kind of think Trump was like great because he owned the libs. So it's just like this vaguely anti-establishment-ism that's anti-imperialism, but it's not even political, and that's what I think people miss too.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Why I meant.
Actually, I wanted to, because we're running out of time, but I wanted to mention one specific thing that everyone should go watch. It's on Majority Report's channel. So I watched the video of that caller, Brandon. So he is a huge fan of Steven Crowder. He's part of Steven Crowder's Mug Club. I guess that's like the membership offerings from Steven Crowder's show. And he knew nothing about Sam Seder, was not a big fan of Sam ambushing Steven Crowder, but the whole point was, he was like, no, look, I don't agree with the way you went about this, but I'm calling in to say, I really, really want Steven Crowder to debate you, because I would like to hear that conversation. I would like to hear that exchange. And that's why this is important, right? Like, look, there's the fun part of it, of course, which we've talked about ad nauseum, we all know that. But when we talk about ideological bubbles, this guy, this guy is clearly conservative, probably disagrees with us on a whole host of issues, but he's open-minded. It's just that he hasn't been, provided with different perspectives on the show that he's a massive fan of. And so he actually really wants to hear that. And that's what gets Steven Crowder so terrified. Not just Steven Crowder, I mean, Dave Rubin is similar. Other elements of the online right, very, very similar. They don't want to debate people who know what they're talking about, because when you have the facts on your side, debating is not that hard, right? Yes, there are tactics and all of that, and you should be aware of debate tactics. It's actually not all about substance. But when you're good at the tactics, as Sam is, and you know your shit, like you're good at the substance too, it's like not the kind of person you want on your little right-wing show, right? It's gonna completely debunk all of the lies you've been feeding your audience. But I just really loved hearing Brandon's perspective. I thought that call was so important. And also, like, he seemed like a genuinely good guy who just wanted to learn more. And so instead of like engaging in the conversations about the others, right? Ooh, the right wing audience. Like, I love that you brought up with the woman from Indiana who's being prosecuted for her role in the Capitol riots. Just the fact that she's in her own bubble. And it doesn't mean that everyone's a lost cause. It's just we need to find ways to kind of infiltrate those bubbles and try to have conversations with one another. It's really our only hope.
And I'll say the last thing about it is, a lot of times people call into the Majority Report and ask, like, how do I get my right-wing family member out of this spiral or whatever? And like, they agree with me on all this anti-establishment stuff, but we can't pull them over. And it's always provide them ask them what they want from their government and then provide them with an alternative. Or if they don't have anything to say, provide them with the policy vision from the left. It's not going to work a majority of the time. It won't, but that's the only way to move it forward. And a lot of these, as Anna said, a lot of these right-wing grifters, it's like a paper tiger. I mean, they pretend they debate everybody, but they are more insulated than anybody. And they keep it that way because they want their audience to continue to not question anything.
Yeah. Emma, this was a delight. You were awesome. Everyone go check out Emma's work at The Majority Report. Hopefully you'll come back soon. Anything else you want to plug before we go?
No. I mean, I'm like loosey-goosey because I'm so happy to see everybody, and I'm so tired that I feel like maybe I was a little too. I spoke a little too much of my mind just then, but hopefully it doesn't come back to bite me.
Oh, it will, but just ignore it. You just made their day. They'll have content for the next month over what you just said. But hey, we have better things to do. We'll focus on that.
Yes.
Everyone have a great night. Emma, thank you so much. And we love you guys. We'll see you soon.
People are eating pie right now all around us. I want some pie, okay?
Sure, John Warderola.
All right.